So you want to get going, Matt?
I'm good to go.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to open the September 9th school committee meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. The town of Littleton began conducting remote participation Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. Those concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. One concern is that the chat function allows a parallel text conversation to a board's public meeting. Chat is essentially running commentary that is occurring, but it is not moderated or followed by the chair. All participants and listeners may not be aware of comments being made because some meeting participants join by phone and do not see these conversations. Another concern is conversations between residents within the chat room, which are not incorporated into the public record. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes, which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask that people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom, or if you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chairperson of the raised hands, and the chairperson will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute, then state their name and address. After speaking, we request the participant return their microphone back to mute. Okay, we have minutes to approve from the August 11th meeting. I'll accept a motion to approve that.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the August 11th meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Brad.
Brad Austin votes yes.
Jen.
Jen Gold, yes.
Emmeline.
Emmeline Rossi is yes.
Justin.
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Matt Hunt votes yes as well, and we have to approve the minutes and oath the bills and payroll from our August 26th meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the August 26th meeting.
And oath the bills and payroll.
And oath the bills and payroll.
Second. Did you second it, Emmeline?
Second, I second.
Sorry. Motion made and seconded. This again is a roll call vote. Jen.
Jen Gold, yes.
Brad.
Brad Austin, yes.
Emmeline.
Emmeline Rossi is yes.
Justin.
Justin McCarthy, yes.
And Matt Hunt votes yes as well. All right, that brings us to our first section of interested citizens. Do we have anyone on the line, Dorothy, right now?
No, we do not.
All right, moving on to recognitions. We do have with us our student representative also. But before we go on to that, I did want to give a quick update on the COVID-19 working group. Some of you may or may not know a lot of the chairs, the select board chair, the board of health chair, school committee chair, police chief, fire chief, town administrator, superintendent, vice chair Justin McCarthy joined us on our last meeting, have been meeting with Katrina Hagberg and a few others to discuss our plans going forward for dealing with COVID. Right now, we're really looking to increase vaccination rates in town. We're actually really good in a lot of these areas, but we can always do better. Our youth our students who are eligible have a really high percentage at this point, but we will be doing some more. The Vax van will be coming back, and we may be doing some other incentive programs with the local businesses in town, try to get up our vaccination rates so that we can hopefully get things back to normal sooner, and also be preventative about the Delta variant that is currently of concern in the community. All right, that being said, Dr. Quenchy, do we have any recognitions?
I'm going to turn it over to Maddie at first, if that's all right.
Go right ahead.
Hi, everyone. In case you don't know me, I'm Maddie Shuffrin, and I'm a senior at the high school. And I, along with Stella Austin, are this year's school committee representatives. We both originally volunteered to do this during sophomore year, but because of COVID, that obviously got pushed back. So we're volunteering this year. As regards to updates with school just starting, there's not a whole lot to talk about. But in the future with upcoming meetings, Stella and I are going to email the principals the beginning of the week prior to the meeting, just to see if there were any things they wanted us to share regarding what's going on in the schools. And also Stella and I are going to talk to our class officers for each of the grades at the high school to see if they have any updates that they want us to share as well. The few updates that I do have about the schools, for Shaker Lane, they had a great first week at school. The preschool students were joined up.
Madison, you're frozen. Can you hear me?
Ones happening right now.
There you go.
Here you go.
Madison, you were frozen, so I don't know if we missed out. Last thing we got was pre-K.
Okay. I just said the preschool students joined on Tuesday at Shaker Lane, and the children are starting to learn the routines of school and build some classroom communities with their peers.
Frozen again. Madison, no volume. She's frozen again. You there, Madison?
Yeah, I'm here.
You froze again. Oh, your voice.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Go ahead. No. Do you want to come out, go out, and I'm not going to take you off, but why don't you sign out and come back in on that same link? Try that. Okay.
In the meantime, I can start my recognition until Maddie comes back with us. I'm thrilled that we have that high school traffic light up and working. I can't believe the difference it makes. I mean, yeah, there
Can
are
you hear
times
me
when you
now?
come out of that high school. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, continue on.
Okay. Did you hear what I said about the middle school or no? Okay.
No.
So the Littleton Middle School, their back to school night is Monday, September 13th from 6 to 8. And the high school is having theirs tonight, obviously. In regards to sports, the high school sports started yesterday, except football, which starts tomorrow. And also in regards to theater, there was a meeting yesterday after school about the play that's going to be happening this fall, which is called The Stage Door. So I'm really excited to hear about that. And that's kind of all the updates that I had so far. So if anybody has any questions or specific requests in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you.
Great job.
Thanks, Maddie.
Hey, thanks, Maddie. Maybe not now because you just started, but in the future, we're going to hear how that new schedule is working at the high school. Because I know a lot of people were excited about it, but some people were worried about if it's a lot of how the changes would affect their learning and just moving around the building. So in the future, we'd love to hear about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on it a little bit based on what I've done so far. I know it definitely has taken me this week and the first week to kind of get used to it with all the switching and stuff. But I do like it because it's, you don't have the same exact schedule each day. So it's kind of switching it up about when you have the class and like how your lunch is switching every day, which I kind of like. And I like that the classes are longer than what they used to be with like the 45-minute kind of time period, but not as long as the whole 90-minute period. So I like that there was like a common ground in between that. I think this next week of school, students are going to start to ease into it and know how to navigate the schedule. I know it's taken a little bit to get used to, but I really like how it's working so far.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Any more questions for Maddie before she signs off? All right, great job, Maddie. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie.
All right, back to Dr. Clenchey.
All right, thank you. As I started saying before, it's wonderful that we have a high school traffic light. I mean, we've been working on that initiative for over 10 years, and those of you that have students or had students in the high school realize how difficult that intersection is. And I'm actually going to go a bit farther and say how unsafe it was at times. Something as a superintendent I worried about a lot, because there were times when you were trying to get out of that intersection that it would take 5 or 10 minutes to get out. Very poor visibility, having young drivers in our high school as well. It just was not a good situation. So kudos to everybody that was involved in making that happen. I know I've been at the high school a number of times since school's been in, when the light has been working, and it's a whole different experience. You get up to that intersection, you can relax, wait for the green light to go, and you don't have to be gripping the steering wheel waiting for a break to get out on the road. So that's a fantastic improvement. Our first day back for staff on September 1st was a great success. We had a keynote speaker, Adam Welcome, national speaker, very motivating and positive, very well received by staff. We also had Adam create 2 breakout sessions with our staff after the keynote. So we had K to 5, pre-K to 5 teachers together, and then we had 6 to 12 teachers together for a session. We finished the morning off with breakout sessions organized by our department heads, grades 6 to 12, and our team leaders, pre-K to 5. And we did a reflective exercise called Sunset, Amplify, and Create. And what that means is we took a look at last year during the pandemic, all the things that we did to adjust to the pandemic, and had our staff take a look at things, sunset things that they don't want to continue to do, and then look at certain items that they want to amplify, do more of. And then the third category, create. What inspired you last year to maybe take some risks and do something different in your classroom? So we have a lot of great information that we've already started to go through. Very worthwhile exercise. There was so much positive energy that day. It was just great to see everybody back in the building and having everybody at the high school. So to everybody involved in making that day happen, thank you very much. Our first day back with students and staff was wonderful. Such positive energy in our classrooms and hallways. Within no time at all, it was like the year never ended. Our students were back in our classrooms, learning, engaged in learning. So it was a perfect start to the school year. The only minor glitch we had was the traffic at the middle school. Didn't help that we had a puddle in the road that was obstructing traffic. But my understanding, talking to Principal Everhart, that the traffic is more manageable this week, and we're back into some regular routines. So really pleased about that. Some of you probably already know Boston Magazine ranked the high schools for last year. I'm pleased to announce that Littleton High School ranked number 4. Last year we were number 2, so to have 2 high rankings out of 149 schools in 2 years in a row is incredible. The credit goes to all of our staff, pre-K to 12, all of our students in high school, especially the class that just graduated, our families for supporting the school system, and of course our school community who approves our budget every year. So it takes a whole community to end up with those kinds of results and high acknowledgement. So thanks to everybody, and also the school committee for advocating for the needs of our students and making sure that we have what we need to be able to meet the needs of every student in our school. So thank you very much. Very proud of that accomplishment. Congratulations, Dr. Harrington. Always nice to have 2 years like that in a row where the school ranks that high.
Thanks very much for the recognition.
Under new business, last agenda item is enrollment 21-22. We always do an enrollment at the beginning of the year. The enrollment that you have before you tonight is dated September 8th, 21. And are we going to run the package now?
While we're waiting for that, is this the time to demand answers on what explains our precipitous drop to number 4? I'm kidding. Congratulations.
I appreciate the statistical humor, Brad. I was thinking the same thing with a lot of these, a lot of some of the other data we're looking at. But yeah, number 4 is great, but I mean, I think it's 100% drop from where we were. It's a little troubling.
It happened since we joined, Justin, so maybe it's on us.
It's our fault, I guess.
Yeah, but congratulations to everyone involved in earning this recognition. That's great news and reflects well on the entire community. So well done, guys, gang.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And when you look at the schools on that list, you know we're in great company. So our enrollment, as you can see on the screen tonight, we nothing that stands out like a sore thumb, so to speak. Our kindergarten enrollment was a little higher than we thought it was going to be. End of July, we had 125 students, and during the month of August, which is very late to have enrollments for any grade in school systems, we had 14 more students register. So that's definitely an anomaly. Not an anomaly in terms of the numbers. We've had classes similar to that size before, as you can see as you peruse down through the enrollment. It is virtually impossible in a district this size to stabilize classes in terms of having plus or minus 5 deviation within a grade. We're just too small of a district to even shoot for that. So you're going to see those highs and lows, so to speak. We're well staffed for kindergarten. We have ed assistants in all of the classrooms as well. So Principal Kane and the assistant principal, Rebecca Deacon, and myself are certainly confident that we're in good shape for this year. Our enrollment, total enrollment is 1,664 students. To give you an idea of where we were a couple of years ago, on April 1st, 2020, we had 1,671 students. And on September 16th, 2020, first day, the first start of the school year, we had 1,568 students. So we pretty well gained everybody back from last year. We had a number of families do different things, everything from private schools to virtual schools, etc. So I'm really pleased that our enrollment came out that close. It's a good sign that people are feeling far more comfortable now during the pandemic, and they're excited to have their children back in school. Any questions about the projected or the enrollment for September?
Yeah, I've got, I guess, 2 questions. One is, I was looking at the school choice numbers for the district. It's 97. And I remember we spent a lot of time with that back in the spring, but I don't remember what we projected. Are we close to a projection there?
Yeah, we're pretty close. In fact, again, last year was an anomaly, but we had 84 school choice students. So we're up a little bit from last year, pretty consistent to what we would expect from year to year. If we can maintain anywhere from 86 to 95 or so, we'll be in good shape in terms of having the revenue to continue to do what we've been doing.
That's what I was asking about. I mean, it's great to have the students in, but also how that affects our revenue and our options for funding things. The other question I have is either for you or or I guess Ms. Kane, is I'm completely satisfied that we have the staffing we need for the kindergarten. After spending the last year so fixated on space, I'm wondering how crowded our rooms are, and if we, if you wouldn't mind speaking to that.
Yeah, I can start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. I mean, our kindergarten rooms are actually a decent size because they're designed for so much more materials in the classroom because of the age of the children. So we're good for space. You know, I've been in all the classrooms and certainly satisfied with what I see. And Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you as well.
Sure, I might need some help on the dates, but I believe when the addition was put on in 1994, Steve or any 90, whenever the addition was.
1998.
Thank you. In 98, the kindergarten classrooms, as Dr. Clenchey mentioned, were much larger than the original structure of the building. So those kindergarten classrooms are well equipped. The teachers have almost everything from storage back into their classrooms, keeping those children 3 feet apart. So I think the question will be next year and looking at our enrollment for first grade and what that will look like. And I'm sure we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm confident that we can figure it out, but kindergarten has more than enough room, and they're tiny. They're 5.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Kelly, I just had a quick question. As it relates, is it okay if I go, Chairman Hunt?
Go right ahead, Jess.
Okay, thank you. With that kindergarten enrollment, as that grade begins to march through the school years, we talked about this, I think as we wrapped up last year, and you had made a good point that over like, as the grades progress through due to attrition, due to some other choices that relates to, I think maybe like the trade schools or high school options, charter schools, magnet schools, whatever, we lose some kids. I note that the 4th grade class in Russell Street's kind of larger than the other 2. So I'm wondering, did that class swell to that size early on and we've started to lose kids, or do we need to be worried about this kindergarten class and having it end up being 150, 160? Or is that a possible threat?
At this point in time, Justin, our enrollments as we go back in history, we should be okay. And you have to remember too, with kindergarten, there's that transition class as well, which is very rare in this day and age, to be honest with you. It's very hard to find school districts that still maintain a transition classroom. It's worked well for us. Parents are happy with it, and our staff still are very supportive of that program. We're fortunate to have been able to keep it during the harder times, so to speak, when budgets were tougher. So that's going to have an effect on that too. I mean, of that classroom size, we're going to have anywhere from 13 to 16 of those students in transition next year. So it's really going to depend on what's coming in also the year behind. And you can see those enrollments fluctuate as you look at our grade 2 class. We have 108 students in that class. So I mean, that's a significant fluctuation. So I'm not concerned at this point in time. I would become a little more concerned if they start opening up more subdivisions and, or building houses that are going to attract young families in town. But I have to tell you, this year was really surprising to all of us at central office. At Shaker Lane alone, this is inclusive of kindergarten, but in the month of August, we had 34 students register. We've never had that before. And some of those students were from families who were waiting to see what we were going to do this year in terms of offering in-person instruction and what mitigation strategies that we were going to offer perhaps. But there was definite more movement from people moving into the community than we've seen in a long time. And that could be just an anomaly. Time will tell.
Okay. Yep. To your point, I think there's 11 children waiting or in transitional now that will join the kindergarten class in first grade next year. So it'll be a wash if we end up with 11 kids that go from kindergarten to transition. So just something to keep an eye on, I guess.
Oh, for sure. And we don't have a lot of space at Shaker Lane, as we all know. We're keeping our fingers crossed that we can get approval for the first stage of the process for a new school. If our enrollment starts to increase as building continues in town, we're going to have to really keep an eye on that. I mean, there's things we can do prior to school approval. We need to move a portable in or two. That's what most schools do when enrollment starts increasing within a community. So just wanted to make you aware of that. At this point in time, we don't have enough information to determine whether or not this is something that's going to continue or not.
Right, and that's something that we want to look into. We've talked about doing a feasibility study in regards to Shaker Lane, so that's one of the reasons we want to certainly. We'll talk more about that this year. All right. Any other questions on enrollment? Okay, that brings us to our presentations. Our first presentation is a brief public health metrics from Katrina Hagberg.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Katrina. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
You get to have to do this a couple times, so.
Getting good. All right, so I'm just going to jump in and make it as short as I can for you guys. I know you have a lengthy agenda. So I have been asked to reiterate my credentials just for transparency purposes. So to be clear, I have a master's of public health from Boston University and a bachelor's of science in biology from Bates College. And I've been conducting disease epidemiology and pharmacoepidemiology research for the last 14 years. And before that, I was in clinical trials for 6 years. And so just to declare my interests, my conflict of interest disclosures, like everyone elected to this board, I am also a Littleton resident and my children attend Littleton public schools, but I have no other commercial, financial, or legal conflicts to declare. And I've just been volunteering my time to try to help you guys. And all data that I've used in any of these reports for the last year are publicly available data. So to dive right into the state data, this is today's dashboard from the DPH. The 7-day average of cases is about 1,100 cases per day. The test positivity is 2.5%. 7-day average of hospitalizations is 596. This is actually flattened out over the last week or so, which is a trend I hope continues. And deaths remain low, averaging about 6 per day. Both the hospitalizations and the deaths are really great signs that our vaccines are doing exactly what we wanted them to do. We designed them to prevent severe illness, hospitalizations, and death, and they are doing that. And I think the current estimate is that as from January until now, less than 1% of all vaccinated individuals have ended up becoming a case of COVID, and there's only a handful of hospitalizations and deaths. So it's just a win. This is what these vaccines are good for. So we're going to go into cases right now. This is the case rates per 100,000 by age group. This gives us an idea of how transmission is going in our communities. All age groups continue to trend higher. This is for the period, the last data points for the period of August 22nd to September 4th. So over the course of August, all age groups continue to trend higher. Currently, the highest age groups are 20 to 29-year-olds, 30 to 39-year-olds, and 5 to 9-year-olds, but everyone else is pretty close behind. So we are trending up. COVID transmission is happening in all age groups. And then this is the CDC community transmission rates. This is for the period of September 2nd to 8th, and Middlesex County continues to be classified as a high community transmission area, as does Worcester County. The current rate is about 112 per 100,000 people in Middlesex County. So we're just above the high threshold that the CDC uses. So let me go into local data. So this is from the DPH website, the updates by municipality. For the 2-week period ending September 4th, Littleton, so that's August 22nd to September 4th, Littleton had 32 cases reported in that 2-week period. This is our 8th week of an increase, but as you can see, compared to last week's, it's actually small. We're about the same as we were at last week's report. So again, for transparency, I'm throwing a slide in here for methods. And some people were questioning the town groupings that we've been tracking from the beginning. So these groups of towns were actually the groupings identified by Mike Fontanella back in August of 2020. And that the reason we've kind of aggregated by town, like multiple town areas, is because Littleton alone is too small to really get, a few cases can really bump us around and makes it really hard to, difficult to interpret the data. So expanding our area of observation to include our border towns or surrounding towns or the 495 area helps us to stabilize rates. It also helps us to compare how things are going in our immediate area versus a broader range. And it makes it possible to keep an eye on things over time. So these are, the state provides two measures in the local data, the average daily incidence rates and test positivity, both measured over a 2-week period. So the last 2-week period is August 22nd to September 4th. So the left-hand graph shows us the average daily incidence rates. Littleton's average daily incidence rates were, for this last period, was 23.4 per 100,000 people. The week before that, it was 22 per 100,000 people. So essentially the same, we flattened out. And all the other areas kind of slowed or flattened. So we're seeing it's like the speedometer, right? We're not pedal to the metal and an increase, we're slowing down. So hopefully this curve continues to slow. Test positivity is the graph on the right. This is the total number of positive tests, not people, tests, divided by the total number of tests conducted in the 2-week period. And this actually test positivity tends to bend a little bit quicker. So hopefully next week our case rates will follow. But test positivity for all the areas that we track are currently less than 3.5%. And we're under that 5% test positivity threshold that people want to stay under to prevent widespread community transmission. And also because our test positivity is under 5%, it's a really good sign that our state is doing enough testing. So the fact that this is low tells us we're identifying cases quickly, which makes the test, trace, isolate system actually more effective. It's actually a layer of cheese that our state is doing really well. So that intervention is good in our state.
Katrina, just quickly, does this, I know I think this is a chart where like the colleges and schools testing affects this. I know Salem State's doing a lot of testing. I know a lot of other schools are doing a lot of testing.
I hear what you're saying. Yes. So that is the other thing that might be impacting these bends, is more on the Middlesex and state level. But yes, the amount of testing that has recently restarted with colleges and even some businesses is impacting these rates. But that's, again, a good sign, because the quicker we identify cases and isolate them, the less they are able to spread. So I'm going to say that's a benefit, and that we're showing that these interventions are widespread and robust.
Thank you.
So when we take these two things together, this slowing of the increase in the average daily incidence rate and combining it with the flattening of the test positivity, these are both positive signs. However, I want to keep in mind, just as Brad just mentioned, that our social behaviors are changing. So colleges just started up during this period, at the end of this period. This data doesn't take into account Labor Day. And every holiday, we have a delay in getting results back. And also less testing happens over the weekend. So we are a little more lagged than normal in terms of the holiday weekend. And also public schools and schools have opened across the state over the last week and a half. So we need more time to be able to say these are trends that will hold. So we are going to look for next week and the week after to really be able to get an idea of what all these changes to our social patterns, what kind of impact that has had on our transmission. Okay. All right. So this is really great data. I'm really excited about this. So this is our town's vaccination data. So at this point in time, 73.6% of all Littleton residents, 0 to whatever age they are fully vaccinated. That's amazing. Add to that 5.9% who have had at least one dose, or sorry, rephrasing, are partially vaccinated. They've received their first dose of the mRNA vaccines. So together, we have 79.5% of all residents have received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. There remains around 13% of our residents who are not eligible for vaccines because of their age is less than 11. And there's about 7.2% of residents who are eligible but have not yet started vaccines. But I want to highlight a few things about that unvaccinated group. Over the last 2-week period, we've had over 80 residents go out and get a shot. So they've moved from unvaccinated to either partially vaccinated or fully vaccinated if they got the J&J shot. And that is the biggest jump we have had since June. So that is a huge movement, and I'm very grateful for everyone who's gone out and gotten vaccinated. That's exciting news. So we're really close to that 80% mark fully vaccinated that the Board of Health kind of set as a target. And the largest group of residents who are currently unvaccinated is actually people ages 30 to 64. So parents, that is us. And the best way we can protect our kids who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated is to vaccinate all the eligible people around them. And this helps protect our schools and our families. So if you have not yet been vaccinated, please consider doing so soon. And also the other group that's large is the 75 plus group. And as Matt mentioned earlier, the COVID working group is trying to look at ways to do more outreach. And one of the outreaches is Elder and Human Services are doing some outreach for that older group just to make sure that they don't need assistance getting vaccines. So this, I'm hoping these outreaches, things that we're thinking about really do work to get more people vaccinated. And as we saw in the earlier data, these vaccinations are really working great for that, preventing severe illness, hospitalizations, and death. And if people do become a case, it's like a mild cold or flu. So it's really, please consider getting vaccinated as soon as possible. And if you do have questions about that, reach out to your doctors. And then the last slide tonight, or not the last slide, I lied. But the last data slide tonight is the health notifications from the school itself. So this week we received one health notification letter about a single case that was at the middle school. And then just to remind everyone that LPS put up a dashboard at the end of last year that is available on the website. And if you need details about either the close contacts, I think it's updated once a week at the end of the week, but Lynn Snow and Dr. Clenchey can provide you guys with more information about this data, since it is their data. And I want to end just on a reminder about the cheese. So these interventions, they're a dial, they're not a switch. So just because we are vaccinated doesn't mean we don't need to use the other layers of cheese at this point in time. We're still working toward that point, but it's where we kind of need to have more tools in our toolbox, depending on the situation and the community transmission rates. So we've seen hopeful data that things are changing. We know our social behaviors are changing. Please take care to do what you can to help prevent spread, vaccination being the priority. But then, masks and getting tested, staying home if you're sick. Those are really important things to do too, just to help protect everyone from transmission, especially indoors. So that is where I'll end tonight.
Thanks, Katrina, for that very succinct presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Katrina? Go ahead.
Not so much a question for Katrina, but just a comment. Well done, Littleton. These vaccination numbers are amazing. And part of it is my context of Tennessee and Arkansas, where I have a lot of friends and family, but 97% of our 12 to 15-year-olds either have both shots or one. And, Justin and I like to assume that means they're going to get the second one. That's amazing. Well done, folks.
All right. And
sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Just on that, I was just going to say, one of the things that we'll be looking for as the year goes on, the commissioners of education has set the goal at 80% for schools before they can consider going maskless. And, we have that one we'll be fine at the high school there, but the middle school is that one anomaly where we have a 6th grade class. But because we have such a high percentage, 97% of that 12 to 15, and as the 6th graders turn, we may reach that point sooner rather than later, that because of all those great numbers we have with the 12 to 15-year-olds. All right. And Justin.
Thanks, Katrina. My question was the 0 to 11. So the vaccine is, hopefully Q1 2022 for 5 to 11, right? And looking for confirmation that it's going to be 5 to 11.
I do believe from the information I've seen that they are looking for 5 to 11 in the next package to go to the FDA.
Gotcha. So do we have a way of just breaking? I'd love to see like the 0 to 4 and then the 5 to 11 to start looking at it, looking ahead. So we're not playing catch up once.
Yeah. So I, unfortunately, the state's vaccination data I've imputed the 0 to 11 by math, subtracting out everyone else, but because I know the total and I know the total for 12 and above. So I don't know the breakdown exactly of the 5 to 11 versus the 0 to 4.
We'll put that request in with the state.
You know what? We might be able to, so I did confirm these denominators with our town census just to make sure that these were reasonable. And I might actually have that data. I might have asked for it in that block. I will get back to you.
Awesome. Thanks. And then my question was maybe for Kelly, that dashboard, shame on me for not paying too much attention to that. I'm looking at everything else. How often is that getting updated? Because that close contact figure was kind of a new figure for me tonight.
We update it each week.
Yeah, each week.
Okay. Is it like on Mondays or?
The date that it's updated and listed is on the top left-hand corner.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Any further questions? No. Thanks, Katrina, as always. Very informative.
You're welcome.
Next, I'd like to turn it over to Lynn Snow. She's going to tell us a little bit about our protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios.
Sure. So I'm actually going to go over the testing program first. We move to the next slide. So just looking back, during the 2021 school year, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, they introduced COVID-19 screening and diagnostic testing in the school setting as an additional mitigation strategy. For COVID-19, it was the first program of its kind nationwide. And so looking forward into the coming school year, EOHHS and DESE made diagnostic and routine weekly COVID pool testing services available at no cost to participating districts and schools through the end of the 21-22 school year. And this is done under a single contract with the testing provider CIC Health. Thankfully, CIC Health is the testing provider that we used last year, so it's hopefully going to be, with the exception of probably some just small bumps in the road, a pretty seamless transition into this year with some additional advantages to the program. So is it pool testing or COVID safety checks? So right now, the testing strategy known as pool testing is now referred to by DESE as routine COVID pool testing for districts and schools. There were focus groups conducted with representative groups of parents and guardians to identify some of the barriers to participation. One of the key takeaways was that the phrase pool testing, it didn't engender trust, and parents were led to believe that their students would be kept out of school. They equated the word pool to random, which sounded inaccurate and efficient. So using the phrase routine COVID safety checks has produced positive reactions from the focus group. So the value in COVID safety checks are, there's multiple benefits to it. It keeps kids and staff safe. It helps us catch cases before they spread to other students and staff. It helps to keep our schools open. It prevents further time away from in-person learning and friends by knowing whether it's COVID, the cold, or the flu, and it helps stop the spread and prevents infecting other members of the household or community. It's endorsed by CDC and CDC's K-12 school operational strategy. They endorse the use of routine COVID safety checks for students as an additional layer of safety for schools in moderate, substantial, and high transmission areas. And so do we still need to wear masks and distance? The routine checks don't replace other mitigation measures such as face masks. Rather, it should be a component of layered mitigation strategies. We've talked about the Swiss cheese model many times, so I won't belabor the point. And so just moving on to the next slide, we're going to be doing for the nose swab for the routine COVID safety checks. The new swab tests, they're painless, they're fast, and they're easy that even a kindergartner can do it. It's not the brain swab that goes high up. It goes into the lower nostril. The results are to be received in 24 to 48 hours, but CIC is reporting that we'll receive the results even sooner than that. And it's overseen by the school nurse. The Buy Next Now swab, will be using that for contact tracing the test and stay program. This is also a nose swab in the lower nostril, which is painless, fast, and it's administered by the trained individual. The results come in 15 minutes. It's overseen by the school nurse, and all of our school nurses are trained to administer the Buy Next Now rapid tests. The routine COVID safety checks, the step-by-step process is very similar to what we're familiar with. They give their sample. We'll be doing the dual swab, the individual swab and the one that goes into the pool. The students will return to the class. The lab will test the sample. We will be able to do any outreach to any of positive COVID-19 cases. We'll be able to immediately start contact tracing, go through test and stay. Anyone without symptoms can do a rapid test for 5 days and be able to stay in school. And then, ta-da, routine COVID safety checks are complete. And so just to go over the test and stay protocol, if we identify a positive pool, the close contacts would be notified. Anyone who is considered a close contact based on exposure. Anyone without symptoms, the rapid test would be performed daily for 5 days, and they'd be able to stay in school during that time. So the components of the program that we will be going forward with this year, we will continue to be offering diagnostic testing for symptomatic individuals. So when they present with symptoms while at school, individuals should not go to school if they're experiencing symptoms while at home. The shallow nasal swab samples are collected at school, and we'll continue to use the Buy Next Now rapid antigen test. We'll also be using diagnostic testing for the test and stay program. This is our close contact testing. The shallow nasal swab samples are collected at school using the Buy Next Now rapid antigen test. They're administered daily for the first day of exposure for at least 5 days. The CIC health staff will be able to assist us in determining when an individual has completed the maximum number of testing days. One thing that I will speak to about that is there has been some confusion over whether it's 5 or 7 days. It's 5 days, but typically that might include a weekend. So during the weekend, the students will be expected to quarantine during that time because we won't be able to perform the test and stay. So that's why it might make it the 7 days. And then the routine COVID pooled testing, the COVID safety checks. We'll be collecting 2 samples at school, after which both of the specimens will be transported to the laboratory. If the pool is positive, the individual follow-up testing will immediately occur at the lab using the second sample originally collected, which is a great improvement to the program for us. The samples are collected through the nasal swab. The only thing is now there will be 2 Q-tips for each student. The samples have to be collected at school, and the students will be able to self-swab. If they need assistance, they'll be provided assistance. They'll be processed at the Broad Institute, and again, just like last year, there'll be 10 samples in each pool. I just included some of the highlighted FAQs that have been asked and have been put out by DESE. One of the questions that has come up is, are the consent forms for the 21-22 DESE program the same as the ones for 2021? No, there will be new consent forms. They're different, and all individuals will need to reconsent to testing for the upcoming school year. The new consent form allows for the schools and districts to acquire consent for all 3 modes of testing. So when you complete the consent, you will be consenting to participate in symptomatic test and stay and routine COVID pool testing through one form. There won't be the option to just participate in one component of the program. You will be consenting to all components of the program. Consent can be acquired at any point during the school year. CIC, the support staff that we have, is going to be managing the consents. So consents will be rolling. We will be able to accept them as they come in. Last year, this is another improvement. Last year, we were collecting them all throughout the week, but then we were updating our pools week to week. So if you signed up during one week, we'd update our pools on Thursday at 5 p.m. and then you would be able to participate in the following week. This will be a lot more immediate, which will be great. And then EMED. So this is another component of the program that we may be able to use. We do not have all of the information on this yet, but it is coming. This is not able to be used for test and stay, but EMED tests may be utilized if an individual who is currently in the middle of the test and stay protocol is participating in an athletic or extracurricular activity on a weekend or a non-school day. So if there is a student who is in the middle of a test and stay protocol and they have a cheerleading competition on a weekend, they will be able to we'll be able to send them home on Friday afternoon with an EMED kit, and then they'll be able to test. If their cheerleading competition is Saturday morning, they could test, get the results in 15 minutes, bring the results, and be able to turn it into their coach. And they'd need to be masked, but they would be able to participate. Another question that has come up is, can schools and districts change testing modes during the year? The answer is yes. The school or district may choose to add or subtract a testing mode at any point during the school year by coordinating with their program coordinator at CIC Health. I think our position is that we really want to start strong and really be able to take advantage of all aspects of the program at this point. But if we see that we need to change at any point, we are not locked into this. Can public schools mandate COVID-19 testing? No, the participation in the testing is optional, and parents and guardians must provide informed consent to participate in the program. Do you want to ask questions about the pool testing program now before I go into the responding to COVID scenarios protocols, or do you want to just ask all questions at the end?
I have a question.
Yeah, why don't we handle the pool testing first?
Okay.
Timlin, go ahead.
So Lynn, what you're saying is, if someone is a close contact and they are not involved in the pool testing, they cannot do the test and stay?
No.
So if they're vaccinated, what does that mean?
If they're vaccinated, so like if my son's vaccinated, if he's a close contact and he's not doing the pool testing, what is the strategy? How do we handle children? That I will be able to go over that when we go through the protocols. That's spelled out.
Okay.
But that's a great question.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Question, if you don't mind. How are you defining close contacts, and is it a self-reported thing? I mean, if kids, how are you defining and determining what the close contacts are, both technically and also just anecdotally?
So the nurses are really handling the contact tracing piece of it, and it's labor intensive. So it involves going and speaking to a variety of different people, tracing back where the student was, where the student has been, who the student has been around. The principals have done a wonderful job kind of orchestrating schedules, so we kind of know where kids are and when, and where there is the potential for them to have been within close proximity of a student, closer than 3 feet. unmasked for a period of longer than 15 minutes. So the definition of a close contact hasn't changed from the perspective of DPH. So it's a cumulative 15 minutes within 6 feet, but for a school-based close contact, it's closer than 3 feet unmasked indoors. And if they, and then they're still considered a close contact by the 6 feet, 15 minutes cumulative, but they're exempt from needing to quarantine. So that's where the difference is between that 3 feet and 6 feet and indoor, outdoor masked. They're exempt also on the bus from being a close contact requiring to quarantine.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say I like the name change. We're no longer jumping into the pool. We're getting in the routine with testing.
You're gonna have to come up with different funds.
Yes. When are we live with this? Because I don't believe that we've consented yet. So
No.
do we hope to go live with this soon?
Oh, we sure do. And so Littleton Public Schools is ready. But what I can say is that CIC has experienced a bit of a bottleneck because, given the volume of this program and the size of it, there has been a delay with people being able to access the portal. I had originally been given access to Vermont's testing portal. So that was straightened out, but our nurses can't yet get onto the testing portal. So while we can perform the collection once we get the supplies, the nurses need to be able to access the portal, as does our CIC support staff team. So they need to be able to log in to see the consents. We're set up for people to be able to collect the consents. We have Littleton's link for collecting the consents. So that's going to get pushed out. So we'll be collecting all of the consents over the next week. We had intended a 9/13 start date, but we don't have the pool testing supplies. So we're planning for a 9/20 start date.
Okay. I think this is obvious, but the two, like I was going to say surveillance, the routine testing, that's great. That's like last year's program. Super nice to have. It's helpful. It's going to give us Littleton data. The test and stay program is a game changer. And I can't emphasize enough how soon we need to put that in place when we're able to. I mean, we got a letter this week, so there were close contacts this week. I wasn't even aware that there were 5 close contacts last week. So unfortunately, those students they're probably quarantining, and if we had the test and stay, they may have been able to do exactly that and not be in a quarantine situation.
Or they could have been close contacts as defined by DPH, but not school-based close contacts.
Okay. All right. So maybe those, yes. But yeah, that's
But yeah, we want to get the test and stay going as soon as possible.
Yeah, and just for, we're playing by a different set of rules than everybody else nationwide. I mean, many other states, possibly none, have this test and stay program going on. So it's quite terrific. We're lucky that we live in Massachusetts and in a great town like Littleton, and it'll be awesome when we get this going. So thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, our Binax Now tests have been received. Those are sitting in the high school nurse's office. So we have plenty of tests ready to do test and stay. We just do not have the individual tubes. We don't have the supplies for the pool testing yet. They haven't come in.
So can you get the test and stay results though if you're not in the portal?
No, we need that.
So
we need the portal.
The test, you just couldn't get the results. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll wait for the portal. Hopefully we get it soon.
Yep, and I've been on the phone with our program coordinator on a daily basis, and she's been at meetings with CIC every day trying to work through this. And so they are working around the clock to get all of these districts set up. So she feels confident that we will be ready to go for 9/20, which I think is, which is great. We were hoping for a 9/13 start date, but I think pushing it back 1 week because and this is statewide, but we're certainly not the only district that's got a lack of tubes.
Right. And another question that was kind of a point of clarification on the consent. I understand it's one consent for all 3 aspects of the program, but if for whatever reason you wanted to be eligible for test and stay, but you, for whatever reason, didn't want to participate in their routine testing, that's allowed. I I would think, right? It's not an
No,
option.
Littleton is,
So you have to,
No.
okay. So.
Yeah.
So if you want the option of test and stay, you must be actively participating in the routine testing as well.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. I just wasn't sure.
Brad, I can't see you. Do you have a question?
I do. And I'll just point out that my question almost every time is how's it going to be working with CIC? It seems like it's going to work, but it's not working yet. I'm with Justin in that I really love this test and stay program, and this eMed, if I got the name right, it's going to be great. So if our kids can participate over the weekend, then we can kind of not have them have to miss a weekend when they could verify that they should be eligible to play. That's fantastic. Keep getting good news. You did mention something, and following up on kind of Jen's question about how we're identifying close contacts. And Lynn, you mentioned that the kind of Board of Health definition or survey versus ours. If students in our district are identified by the Board of Health as close contacts, but not as an in school, they can still do the test to stay if they're doing part of the testing regimen, right?
If they're a school-based close contact, I think when I go through the protocols, that will help it clarify it as well. But if they're determined as a close contact due to an outside of school exposure, then they're not able to participate in test and stay.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's interesting to me. So at a soccer practice, someone's identified as a close contact. It happens after school. Those students would not be eligible to participate in test and stay?
That's a school-sponsored event, so that would be considered a school-based close.
I was thinking rec soccer or something like that. Okay.
Rec soccer, no, that would be different. Yeah, so if it's like a town-based soccer game, then no, that's not considered.
Out robotics, none of that would. Okay.
If it's a school-sponsored extracurricular activity.
All right. Huh. Well, let's see these scenarios. I'm interested now. I'll follow up questions, I promise.
I just want to say one other thing, just to point out, Lynn, you mentioned something that you kind of quickly glossed over, but I think it's great, is that the nuance to the new pool testing or whatever it's called situation is that there are 2 swabs. And so there's not a follow-up step, right? That the child who, let's say within a pool, there's a positive detection. You don't have to then retest all these kids, right? You test individually the second sample. So it's a less cumbersome, burdensome process from the student's perspective, which actually could be a good selling point for parents who are maybe leery of signing their kids up. So I might highlight that when you try to, I personally think everyone should do do pool testing and the whole package. I think it's better to have that data. And I think that's a huge improvement in the process.
Right. Last year, we collected 1 sample. We would get the results that there was a positive pool, and then we would be doing the follow-up or the reflex testing. So the change is that we're collecting 2 samples immediately so that the follow-up testing can be performed in the lab.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios. It is a choose your own mystery. So protocol A is probably, it's the most straightforward. And so that is when an individual tests positive for COVID-19, they go home. And so the protocol A is they are able to return to school on day 11. And once their symptoms have improved and they are fever-free without fever-reducing medicine for 24 hours. It's important to note that the 10-day period starts with the onset of symptoms or after the positive PCR or antigen test is, if the individual is asymptomatic. If the individual tests positive as part of a pool test, the 10-day period begins the day the pool test returned a positive result. Individuals who do not meet the criteria after 10 days should receive clearance from either public health authority contact tracers, the local board of health of community trace and collaborative, or the school health professionals before returning to school. Return to school should be based on time and symptom resolution. It's not recommended that individuals take another COVID test prior to return. So that's protocol A. That is for individuals who test positive for COVID.
When, just for absolute clarity, these are 10 actual days, not 10 school days, right?
10 actual days. Mm-hmm.
And this is vaccinated or unvaccinated? Both.
Correct. There's not a different, if you test positive, if it's breakthrough COVID or, you weren't vaccinated, it's treated the same way. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Protocol B is for asymptomatic close contacts. So we start with a close contact, you're a close contact with a COVID-19 infection and you're asymptomatic. You are exempt from testing and quarantine if you're asymptomatic and fully vaccinated. Classroom close contacts, provided that both individuals were masked and at least 3 feet apart. Bus close contacts, provided individuals were masked and bus windows were open, or if the individual had COVID within the past 90 days. And so if you are exempt from testing and quarantine, then yes, you stay in school. If you are not exempt from testing and quarantine, does your school offer test and stay and you are opting in? If yes, then you follow protocol B1, which is test and stay. The duration is 7 days. The testing is on school days and any extracurricular weekend days, like I talked about for the EMED. You will remain in school so long as you are asymptomatic and you wear a mask in school at all times other than when eating or drinking, and you need to keep 3 feet distance when unmasked due to the extent feasible. You test negative daily on school days and any weekend days for extracurricular activities, and that's when we would do the weekend tests, the EMED take-home test. You would quarantine at home on non-school or extracurricular days, and you're expected to monitor symptoms through day 14. So when we go back up that little hill to, does your school offer test and stay? And if you are not opting in, you will either follow protocol B2 or protocol B3. If you are going to quarantine and one test, then that's the traditional protocol. You would return to school on day 8, provided that you remain asymptomatic and that you receive a negative COVID PCR or rapid antigen test on day 5 or later, and you're expected to monitor symptoms through day 14. If you're not following the test and stay, this is the preferred option to cut down on a student's absence from school. The other option, which would be protocol B3, our alternate protocol, is that you would return to school on day 11, provided you remain asymptomatic and that you monitor symptoms through day 14. And so that is for asymptomatic close contacts. That's protocol B.
But Lynn, can I clarify here? These are asymptomatic close contacts when the contact occurred at school settings, not if the contact is at church. If the contact is at work, then
they are treated like a non-school close contact.
Okay, thank you.
They're expected to quarantine and follow protocol. Protocol C is for symptomatic individuals at school. If you're experiencing symptoms, we would immediately test with Binax Now. If you test positive, you follow protocol A, which is for individuals who test positive. If you are negative and you're presenting with any of the following symptoms, the first 4 symptoms that are bold and in yellow, vaccinated individuals should only answer yes if experiencing the symptoms in bold. Unvaccinated individuals should answer yes if experiencing one symptom in bold and or any combination of the symptoms not in bold. If the answers are no, they return to class and they retest again in 3 to 5 days, 3 to 5 days later if the symptoms remain the same. And so if yes, then you follow the quarantine or the quarantine with a test or the quarantine without a test. And so that's protocol C1 and protocol C2. Protocol C1 is post-symptoms and a test. So you return to school once your symptoms improve, you're fever-free without fever-reducing meds for 24 hours, you receive a negative PCR test, or a doctor makes an alternative diagnosis. Close contacts whose symptoms resolve before 7 days may return to school provided that they enter into test and stay until day 7. The alternative protocol is that they return to school on day 11 if their symptoms improve and if they're fever-free without fever-reducing meds for 24 hours. And so this is for symptomatic individuals at school.
That's a lot of information, Lynn.
A lot of
Thank you. I'm gonna try to print it out so I can read it.
Yep, I have many copies of them printed out and handy because it is a lot, and it's like, you know, choose your own mystery. You're gonna have to really follow them closely. But what I can say is that the nurses are amazing, and the nurses are you know, very well versed and are very comfortable with following the protocols and are aware of how to follow the protocols and ensure that they are being followed at the schools.
It's a lot better having a flow chart. We just received this a couple of days ago. We just had pages and pages of material to read before that. So this is quite an improvement, although it is a bit of a maze. I can now go back, and I think, Justin, you asked the question about our table we have on our website. The close contacts that were listed other than the middle school were not close contacts associated with school. Happened before school started.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
You bet.
Lynn, a question. Is the Binax now test the same or similar to the test that many of us have done, like the rapid test that we've all been doing over the past year plus, CVS or wherever?
Yeah, Binax now is like the most popular rapid antigen test being used.
Can you bring up the flow chart for B again? Because I think that's the one worth looking at as maybe we approach an October 1st or, you know, at some point a DESI change with masking. I just want to make sure that I'm interpreting this correctly. So if you are identified as a close contact, but you're asymptomatic, you think you're perfectly well, so long as you are vaccinated, you immediately collect $200 pass go and remain in school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone right now, whether you're vaccinated or not, because everyone's got masks on and we're doing our very best to keep 3 feet apart, none of us are really subject to test and stay anyways. We're all exempt from quarantining and testing as long as we're all masked and all doing a good job of staying 3 feet, right?
For the most part, yep.
Yeah. So if masks were to ever come off in the high school, we would lose that piece of it. But those that are asymptomatic, if we were at like 85% vaccinated, 85% of the population would really not be affected under this protocol system because they would be able to use the vaccinated and then remain in school.
Correct. And I will say that Jeff Riley has said that he will be providing additional information as we move closer to that October 1st date. I don't know what that information will be, but that's, you know, a good point of consideration is, you know, when we get there, what is that going to look like with that exemption from quarantine with regard to the masking versus not masking if you're fully vaccinated and you're, you know, too young to get vaccinated at some point, you know.
Yep. Okay. Got it. Perfectly clear now. Thank you.
Lynn, is it safe? I'm keep fixating on the location of exposure being such a big factor in what options or what paths you follow. Is it safe to say that, well, look, I mean, you're better off there are many more options you're exposed in the school, but if your child is exposed outside of school, then it's pretty much sidelined for a while, right?
Yeah, I think that the basis of this, or what, you know, I've heard when we've been at our webinars, is the reason for this is that because the schools are, you know, vigilant, we have all of these protocols and mitigation strategies in place that they're able to allow this to be the protocol, but that's why they're not allowed to participate in test and stay if there is an exposure related to something that happens that's not school related or outside of school.
Well, I guess my takeaway from that is that as we're starting to enter youth soccer and games and everything else, is that it's incumbent on those who are kind of organizing the kids to keep them, you know, from being able to be categorized as a close contact. You know, whatever we can do as individuals, as a community, as people with leadership positions to prevent the community spread,
right?
It's going to really affect our schools and in a direct, tangible way, not just the schools reflect what's happening in the community. kids who are exposed out in the community will miss a week, 2 weeks of school.
And it's important to remember too, Brad, and maybe we're going to have to double check with what the local health board, our local health board is doing. But tonight we're talking about indoor exposure. We're not talking about outside. In terms of DESI regulations, there are no close contacts at this point in time for outdoor activities.
That's a good clarification. Thank you.
Any more questions for Lynn before?
I forgot, Brad, my question is the same as Brad's question. So, Lynn, do you think it's a financial reason? The state's paying for test and stay. They're paying for these programs. So they're basically saying, hey, look, if you get identified as a close contact in one of our buildings on our watch, we'll go ahead and pick up the tab. But if your brother or sister comes down with COVID and all of a sudden you're a close contact and it was a household close contact, now all of a sudden, to Brad's point, that child's been sidelined for 11 days. Is there anything that we could do as a school committee to try to approve a test and stay program for potential close contacts that happen outside of the school buildings?
I don't believe that.
What I really mean is inside the school buildings.
Yeah, I don't believe that that's an option with this DESI program.
Yeah. Maybe we could investigate something similar. I think the tests were like $5 a student or something like that. So maybe we could investigate something where we would have the resources to provide test and stay, and we would follow the same protocols, and everything should be fine. It'd be worth looking into, I think. Does anybody feel that that's worth looking into?
I'd like to see if that's an option. I think that's a good idea.
Well, I'm also thinking like, so I only have one child in the schools now, but if parents have kids in the schools that are close contacts and they're home, what about their other children? Are we going to be able to test them as a stay and like a test and stay? Because, so say if you have a child in Shaker Lane who isn't vaccinated, who is a close contact, and then you have a child at Russell Street and the high school, if they're a close contact and they're home, how are we regulating that? How are we making sure that they're going home as a close contact and they have to stay home for 11 days, but are we also making the siblings stay home too?
Well, I'd be hoping that you'd be keeping the siblings 6 feet apart so that if you have one child that's participating in test and stay.
Right. That's what we hope, but that's not always possible depending on living situations and things. So I'm not, I mean, I would love to be able to say that if possible, that if a child is a close contact, that we would test the other siblings too. If they're in the close does that make sense?
Yeah. So if there's a child that's participating in test and stay, does that automatically mean that the siblings would be able to participate in test and stay? I don't know. I would have to get back to you.
Right. Well, I'm assuming the parents would sign all 3 of their children up. If they're going to sign 1 up, you're going to sign 3 up. But if my kid goes home sick, or not sick, but goes home because they're a close contact and they have to stay home for the so many days or test for the so many days, isn't there a chance if they become symptomatic and they actually come down with COVID, they're going to give it to their siblings at home?
Right.
Because
it would be
most people won't mask the whole time at home just because they're a close contact, especially if it's a vaccinated child. Right. So if my child at the high school is vaccinated, he comes home and he had younger siblings, wouldn't we want to test and stay them also?
But if you're asymptomatic and fully vaccinated, you're exempt from having to quarantine.
Okay, but they're testing that 3 to 5 days, right? If I'm understanding it. So if
they're not.
They're not.
Okay. Not if they're vaccinated.
All right, I need to read this whole thing then because I need to go through it all again.
I wanted to follow up on a comment. We know from experience that a lot of the clusters that we had last year were within homes. So I know it's difficult for families to to quarantine and isolate, but it is key for us to keep control of this virus, that we do everything that we can in those situations, or we will continue to have clusters within households, which is going to affect the broader community, including the schools. So, again, I guess just a recommendation to everybody: if crowding is an issue, try to find somewhere else to house during that time. It's pertinent that we do whatever we can to prevent that spread, especially if you are a close contact.
So, and then the unvaccinated kids, if they're a close contact and they're home for that, however many days they need to be home for, how are we educating them?
Well, the Board of Health,
Because Desi said we can't do online learning, so how?
right. Well, what we've done in terms of our approach to this is we've had a conversation with our principals to monitor every child that's out as a close contact, to making sure that their learning needs are being met. So that's regular contact. It's very similar to an SST approach. And depending on the child, whether they're symptomatic or asymptomatic, if they're symptomatic and sick, they shouldn't be connected to school. They should be getting better. If they're asymptomatic and have COVID, that's a whole different story. And we're going to do what we can to keep them connected as much as possible. Again, it's like anything else since the pandemic has hit. Things will evolve in time. If schools end up having more close contacts that are asymptomatic at home, I would imagine that DESE's going to have to revisit the guidelines that they put into play, protocols more correctly, that they put into place. But we're watching this very closely, Timlin. This is one thing that is concerning to me. I know Justin wants this program up and running, and I do as much as Justin, because right now, without our testing and stay program, we're a little vulnerable. So
Right.
the quicker we get this program in place and get testing, the better off we're going to be as we're bringing everybody back together into buildings. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that we can get this up and running as soon as possible. But the Board of Health, you have to remember, has a key part in this in our town. If their close contact's not affiliated with the school, they're dealing with the Board of Health. They're the provider of service in that situation as well. So I think that's important to remember.
Justin.
And I think just
no, go ahead. I'm sorry, Lynn.
Just re-emphasizing the test and stay program, that it's keeping kids in school. So if they're a close contact and they're asymptomatic, then my hope would be that they're participating in the program, and we would be able to test them each day and have them stay in school with that negative test.
And so I really appreciate this discussion. And Justin, I liked your question about, was there something we can do? And since this isn't coming online till the 20th, at the earliest, it seems, we may have a little time to explore if the limiting factor for out of school contacts is access to test, and if that's something that can be solved with funds, or if there's another limiting factor, trying to let those students participate in test and stay. We're not going to resolve it tonight, but that may be something for us to keep thinking about and keep kind of poking around with questions over the next 10, 12 days. So next time we meet, we may have more answers. Does that make sense?
And it would be helpful, Brad, too, perhaps to approach the Board of Health as well. They are providers of a service, and there are students, but unfortunately, we can't have them participate in test and stay, as we all know. So perhaps the Board of Health can partner with us and help figure out a solution together so that we can support all of our students in the community, despite the situation.
I like that idea.
Any more questions? Dorothy, I see we have a couple hands raised. If the questions are relevant to our protocols as far as testing and response to positives, COVID-19 scenarios or close contacts, we can take those now.
Okay. Matthew, Ridge, is your question pertaining to protocols?
Somewhat, yes, it is. At least part of it is. I'll do the rest later if I have to.
Okay, your name and your address, please, Matthew, and your question.
Matthew Ridge, 325 Great Road. Two things, or really a few things, but the issue here is you guys are talking about students that are asymptomatic who have been given the COVID shot. Okay, great. Those people are now interacting with students whom, as you said, at home, who may or may not have the shot. I remember back in the beginning, we were told that even though the child is asymptomatic, they are a super spreader concept. What has changed? Because honestly, if it's going to be one way or the other, we need this nailed down, because it's either the child is going to be a super spreader or the child is not a super spreader. And if the child is not a super spreader, then we also need to realize that any child who is of the younger ages that are showing being asymptomatic but without anything, that are not COVID, do not have the COVID shots, follow the same routine. Because honestly, if they are asymptomatic, they hold as much chance of infecting somebody as somebody who is asymptomatic who has had the COVID shot. Because as we've seen with other countries such as Israel, who has a 90% success rate of COVID shots, we are still seeing people who are symptomatic and asymptomatic. They're at a rate of over 25% being infected. And I think Darcy, or however you say their acronym, needs to resettle this, because as it stands right now, the majority of all infections are inside the home. There have been over 4,728 clusters within that has been reported since the last report came down. That is the majority. That is, out of all the cases, the new clusters, there's only 4,964 clusters reported. There's roughly under 200 and something clusters that are not at home. So this is going to be something that we are going to have to work into and find out what's going on with this. Because if you're saying that the asymptomatic children are not an issue, they can keep on coming in. And before we were told that they are going to be super spreaders, that everybody's in danger, we need a definition. Because if they're either dangerous or they're not. And if they're not dangerous, we need to make sure that the children themselves with the COVID shot or without the COVID shot are treated the same. Thank you.
Dr. Clenchey or Lynn, do you want to handle that?
Well, so I can say that, they can spread when they have COVID. And if we're doing the test and stay program and they're testing negative each day, then they're negative.
The only thing I can really add to the conversation is that the protocols that are developed, that we're following, were developed by Mass Department of Health with a team of experts. And as I said before, we're not experts around this table. We rely on experts to give us protocols to follow. And I'm sure they're going to be following the data and making any changes that they feel are necessary. And so we're following the protocols that have been given to us, and we'll be watching the data very closely as well, and certainly communicating with both DESE and Mass DPH.
Thanks, Dr. Clenchey.
Next question.
Eileen?
Teresa, your question pertaining to protocols, school testing?
Yes, I think so. My question just has to do with what happens. So we have kids masked at school all day, but when they're at lunch, is the way they're reported to parents as a point of exposure different? So I don't know if I'm asking this correctly. If students are exposed at school and they're considered a close contact, and whether they don't have to quarantine, I assume it's because they're masked. And if they are at lunch, how do you track that? Where they're not masked. Would those kids be subjected to testing stay?
If they're defined as a close contact.
Okay, so when they're at lunch, we know who they're sitting next to.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. There's so much information to take in. And as a parent, I'm clearly concerned. But I do want to thank everyone for doing such a stellar job. I have 2 kids that are off to a great start. But yeah, it's a lot to work through. I'm just trying to figure out the nuances of it. And I do want to clarify one thing. On 9/20, you said that we would start sending in this would be one last question, the signing up to be part of the protocol for the pool, not the pool testing, the community testing. What are the school strategies for getting more parents involved in that? Because as a parent, I was disappointed in the level of participation last year.
I mean, I think one of the strategies is just all of the advantages to the program and how it looks different this year. I think the test and stay is a huge advantage, and it will be a huge draw for parents to want to participate. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to get a lot more of a response. I think our participation was pretty good last year, considering all of the factors and the newness of it and the unknowns. And I think we also have a whole lot of negative pools in our back pocket from last year, which I think should, build some confidence with that too. And the added layer of being able to do the test and stay, being part of a positive pool doesn't need to be as potentially scary as it was last year.
I'd just add to that, Lynn. I think that's certainly be part of it. But I just am so encouraged by these vaccination numbers of our school age population. And my guess is we have 97% of families of kids in certain age groups participating, getting their kids vaccinated, or at least one shot. Then my hope is a similar percentage will participate in this program.
Thank you, Eileen.
Erica?
Erica Podgorny.
Yeah, so a follow-up to Eileen's question. This is
Erica, I'm sorry, can I have your address, please?
Oh, sorry, Erica Podgorny, 6 Fox Lane. So being masked and at least 3 feet apart seems like the key to being able to keep kids in school. So just wondering what the protocols are for lunch and snack where kids aren't masked, and what at that point, when are they considered a close contact at that point, if they're unmasked?
Dr. Clencher or Lynn, do you want to handle that?
Sure, we would be following the definition. And so we would just through contact tracing determine who would be considered a close contact, and that's done by the nurses at the school.
But so what are you doing to keep kids apart? I mean, are they being kept apart a certain distance when they're unmasked? And is there a distance is it 6 feet that there's not a close contact if they're unmasked?
Could you say that again?
So I'm wondering how teachers, how the school in general is handling lunch. Are they how far apart are they being kept, and for snack as well? And is it 6 feet apart that is considered no longer a close contact if they're unmasked?
I mean, so I know the principals went through this in a previous, but maybe like if the principals want to touch on that again.
I could,
protocols, or
I can maybe help Lynn so that we, if principals would like to add to the conversation, that's fine. We knew when we were bringing all of our students back that 6 feet of distance is not going to work in most circumstances. So we're striving for 3 feet, and when possible, because there are times with the enrollments that we have that may not be possible in its entirety, but it's possible for most of the time in most situations. So the 6 feet, and unless we have a class with 10 students in it, which doesn't happen very often, it isn't going to be possible. Can we hit 5 feet a lot of the time? You bet. But we spent a long time last year going through this exercise in all of our classrooms and reconfiguring as much as possible. So again, when you have full enrollment, our schools, I don't know of any schools that are designed to have students 6 feet apart. That's not what that's not the way they were designed. So we're doing what we can. Eating outside when possible immensely helps in this situation. And principals, any of you would like to add to that? That would be great.
I think you said it well, and Lynn said it well throughout the presentation. Each individual case would go back to this. If there was a close contact situation, we look at each individual case, follow the protocols, follow the flow chart, and there are of course potential situations where if a student might be ruled a close contact of someone at lunch because they could have been less than 3 feet apart for 15 minutes or more unmasked. But we go back to that flow chart and see if a lot of the high school students are fully vaccinated. Each case it's hard to speak to this question, Erica, because each case is unique and we need to follow the guidance and the clear protocols that we have, and that's what we would do.
I can talk to Russell Street a little bit. We have been eating all of our snacks and all of our lunches outside until today. Today was our first test being inside. We have a 12 by 12 grid set up of chairs facing in the same direction in the cafeteria. All of those chairs are 3 feet apart. And we have a seating plan. So we know with each grade that comes in, who's sitting where and who is sitting around them. So the students were unmasked, probably 15 minutes in their seats by the time they get their lunch and sit down, and then empty their trays to go back into recess. We do ask that students put their mask back on when they're done eating. So their mask is not off the entirety of lunchtime, just while they are eating. And the remainder of the time, we've been able to be outside, spread out, which has been really nice. And we're hopeful to maintain that throughout the fall.
Yeah, at the middle school, it's largely the same as what Cheryl just talked about at Russell Street. We have lunches in 2 locations, the cafeteria and the gym. Each one has about 65 or 70 kids in it, in desks, in rows, at least 3 feet apart. We try to get them to, it sounds awful, get to eat as quickly as they can so we can get them outside. With that many kids, we just don't have the space outside for kids to eat outside in that way. But we try to be mindful of student movement, and when they're done eating, having masks go back on. Keeping tabs on where every kid is in case there's a close contact. We'll know right away who they're sitting next to.
And at Shaker Lane, we do have assigned seating for our students. We have reconfigured our cafeteria 2 times. The second time was later this afternoon, which will go into play tomorrow. We had our students, but with 140 plus kindergartners. We had them in rows similar to what Mrs. Principal Temple had with trays. And it was really just difficult when they're coming in, not really knowing their full name or able to say it and for us to understand it, not knowing their class teacher, the number they had. So we brought our round tables back. We had barriers set up. So some of the students, about 3 or 4 at a table, were about just over 2.5 feet apart. And I'm going to say, I don't think those masks are off for more than 10 minutes. By the time they come in, they sit down, they eat their lunch, they put their mask back on as soon as they're done. We're lucky if we're hitting 10, 12 minutes. But just to take an extra precaution, we are bringing out some more roundtables. We started that process this afternoon, and all the chairs, and those will be in place for tomorrow's lunch, where our students will be at least, if not more, 3 feet apart at lunch, every student moving forward.
Thanks, principals, for taking the time to explain exactly what we're doing to mitigate that in the lunchrooms. Any other questions? I don't see any hands raised. We're going to move on to the summary of the ESSER 3 community and staff survey results and overview of the grant proposal. Elizabeth Steele and Lynn Snow are going to present that.
That's you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chairman Hunt. So glad to share some information this evening with everyone about the ESSER 3 grant and the survey that went out this summer about the grant that we're putting in very soon. So it's been a collaborative effort discussing this grant and coming up with this plan. And so I just appreciate the collaboration that has come through with this grant process. Tonight's presentation is twofold. The first part of our presentation will share with you a review of the survey data that we received this past summer. And then the second half will give you an overview of the district's plan for this grant. So diving right in about the survey, before I go any further, I want to share what ESSER actually means, right? In classic education, we use a lot of acronyms. And so ESSER stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds. And it was with the third installment is where we are at, which is why we say it's the ESSER 3, because it's the third time that we have these funds coming in, this influx of short-term funds. And so the purpose of these funds is to address learning recovery that has been an impact of COVID-19. And it's important to note that these funds are for one-time short-term expenditures that are a result of the ongoing pandemic. So the fact that it's this one-time short-term impacts how we're able to use this money. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go through this presentation this evening. So we sent out a survey. It had 4 questions on the survey. We sent it out July 20th and asking for input from a variety of stakeholders about how best to prioritize these funds. And so the survey remained open through August 6th, and we had in total 342 responses. So on the next few slides, we'll review the data from the survey. So the first question was, we asked who was completing the form. And so you can see here a reflection of who responded to our survey. The largest group of respondents were caregivers and family members, and that made up 66% or 228 respondents. That was followed behind by students, which were 12.3% or about 42 students. So we appreciate the fact that everyone that took the time to complete the survey during the summer. The next slide is the second survey question that we put out there. And so we asked what the respondent believes is the highest priority for this school year relating to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we asked to select all that applied. And so you can see here that out of the options that were provided, the top 4 are actually our top 4 most responded or wanting to have highest priority on these topics. And so those top 4, the very first one being academic support and intervention, with 68% of respondents selecting that. The next one is actually social emotional learning, with 56.7% of respondents selecting that. Third is mental health services and support, with 56.1%. And then the fourth is the developing a strong multi-tiered system of support to allow for access to high quality instruction and materials, accelerated learning, and just-in-time support. And 52.9% of our respondents selected that. The third question on the survey, which is the next slide, For this question, we asked, when addressing the needs of students with disabilities resulting from the loss of services related to COVID-19, we recognize there are many possible supports, but we listed 4 possible options. And so of the 4 options, we asked respondents to select one that they would like to see LPS make a top priority. And as you can see pretty clearly, that 73.4% of our respondents chose as a top priority that supports to help students make up for progress or skills that were lost was the top priority. And survey question 4, the final one, was the open question allowing for ideas and comments to come in. And so when we look at this slide, what I did was I took all of the responses, every single idea, comment, response that everyone provided, and I put it into a program that created a word cloud. And so the way that the word cloud works is that the larger the word is on this display here, the more times it was typed in as a response. And so you can see that the #1 largest word used in the responses were students, right? Other words that jump out at you include help, social, staff, time, health, emotional, and instruction. And so on the next slide, we actually can see some of the more detailed responses that were put on there. And so we can see that students first, which we saw in that word cloud, right? Students were the #1. That has come across in all of our conversations. Whenever we have talked about this as a team, it always comes back to students first. And so it's nice to see that in the word cloud that came out so prominently. Another topic, general topic that was mentioned a lot was mental health, right? And supporting mental health of our staff and our students and expanding those supports. Social and emotional health was also another topic that was brought up very frequently, and increasing social emotional support and interweaving social and emotional learning throughout all parts of the day, which is something that we have been working on a lot the past couple of years, but I think everyone acknowledges is extremely important given the past 1.5 years that we have had. Furthermore, another topic that was frequently stated was just allowing for students to engage with each other. And so to socialize with each other, have time to talk academically, but also on a social level, and just practice those interpersonal skills with each other again. So including collaborative group work during class times or social groups, allowing that to happen during the school day. A 4th general topic that came up was with regard to the ventilation system and airflow and wanting to make sure that the quality of the system is still upgraded. And so that came across several times throughout the comments. A 5th category that I would say came out frequently was this idea of balancing technology. So some respondents said, we have had way too much screen time and we want to backtrack that and not go nearly as deep on the screen time. And we have others who have said, you know, we want to maintain the technology skills that we have acquired over the past 1.5 years. And so finding that balance of what's right for our students. And then the 6th category that I will say that has came up frequently for this question in the survey is meeting the students where they are at. So acknowledging as they're walking into our buildings, they're walking into our classrooms as they are, and finding out what that is, where they are, and taking them from there. And so based on that information on question number 4, we thought it would be helpful to provide just a few updates, just brief updates on a couple of topics that I think would help alleviate some of the questions that were posed in question number 4 of the survey, but also some comments that were also made just to clarify and bring forth again just some of these updates so that everyone is on the same page and aware of what we have done and what we continue or plan to do. So we have 4 updates and we're going to have a variety of people speaking to these updates. So we'll start with ventilation and airflow, and Steve Mark is going to speak to that update.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm happy to report that all of their mitigation strategies and all of their upgrades to the HVAC systems that we implemented last year are still in place for this year. We continue and have changed all of the filters as routine maintenance over the summer. We continue, when possible, to use a higher MERV rated filter, MERV 13s, if that's possible. We continue to service the system and clean the systems. We encourage all of their classrooms, and we have provided in all of the classrooms and all of the spaces within the schools the HEPA filters. We encourage everyone to use those and turn those on. We have additional filters for those as those filters start to need to be replaced as well. We have also we continue to increase the airflow in the building. We run the exhaust fans to move the air out of the building as their HVAC univentilator systems bring in fresh air into the classrooms. I'm also pleased to announce that over the summer, we also added a number of air conditioning units to classrooms at all of the schools. Not all of the school is air conditioned, but there are an increased number of classrooms that have received air conditioning units over the summer. So that should help in that area as well. Be glad to answer any other questions related to the HVAC.
Steve, can you, thanks for that. And I'm so glad we're talking about MERV 13 filters again. I've missed those days. Can you explain, did we get air conditioners in the second floor of Shaker Lane?
Yes, we did. We put in, I think there's not every classroom, but there are classrooms on the second floor at Shaker Lane that are now air conditioned.
That is so good to hear. Thank you.
In addition to the cafeteria at Shaker Lane is now air conditioned. The cafeteria at the high school is now air conditioned. Russell Street obviously is completely air conditioned. Middle school cafeteria is now air conditioned as well, in addition to a number of classrooms at middle school, high school, and again, Shaker Lane, were all added air conditioning into some of the classrooms.
Was that an application of some of these funds, or
no
funds are out of the regular budget?
That was out of the regular budget.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Steve before we move on to clubs and activities? Good.
All right, so we'll move on to clubs and activities, and we'll start with Dr. Harrington, and we will go down towards Shaker Lane from there. So Dr. Harrington, if you could provide the update with regards to clubs and activities at the high school.
Yeah, sure. Happy to report that our clubs are reignited and ready to go. There's going to be there's been some, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, there's going to be a fair amount of requests for new clubs. And we always tell students, particularly the freshmen when they're coming in, if there's something we don't offer and you'd like to get it started, just let us know. We'll find an advisor and we'll get it going. So all our traditional clubs, for the most part, are underway or getting underway soon. We've already posted for the stipended positions where the advisors, apply and to run a club. So I guess that's the summation of it. Our typical activities around homecoming and fall spirit week are also getting underway. We're trying to have as routine a year as possible with the allowance that we're going to be pushing a lot of things that we would typically do indoors, outdoors, weather permitting. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We're getting it going here at Littleton High School.
Yeah, at the middle school, I'll second a lot of what John says. We anticipate having many of the same clubs that we usually do. A lot of it's going to be dependent on transportation, availability of that. We have a number of new staff, and so I know some of them are eager to try some new things. I know one teacher's already approached me about starting like an esports league after school, so I know there's some genuine interest there. So I'm looking forward to some of the new offerings that some of our new staff will want to have. We have fall sports. We had a PTA meeting this week, kind of discussing the ability of, are we going to be able to bring back like kids' night out and dances? So some of this stuff is still in the discussion phase. We don't normally get to the clubs part of it until really the end of September, early October before we start to finalize that. So some of that's still kind of TBD as we work through the first few days. But we anticipate trying to offer as much as we can for students to be able to connect and socialize with each other after school.
Any more?
Camera and unmute at the same time. I will say for Russell Street, we do I'm pleased to see that there's lots of opportunities within the school day for kids to socialize. I'm happy to see the majority of our classrooms have tables back. Kids are working together at tables. The desks are organized in patterns that are 3 feet apart, but still in a group so kids can work together. Morning meeting is happening, after school, end of the day meeting is happening. And like I said, with the outside lunch and no maintaining cohorts, kids can move around and be with their friends together out in the grassy area in the chairs and under the awning. So there's a lot of opportunities for socializing and working together during the school day. The clubs and activities at Russell Street are generally begin at the same time as the ones at the middle school do, and which is usually the first full week of October. In past years, teachers have volunteered to run clubs and activities after school. We are very bus dependent. And so in the past, a bus has come to pick up the kids from Russell Street and drive them to Shaker Lane. And then they get on with the Shaker Lane students to go home. Russell Street buses are our regular 2:30 buses, are also the late bus for the middle school. So I was meeting with Chris Whitcomb today to get numbers on those buses to see how many students we can accommodate for after school clubs and activities. So that's in the works. And I'm waiting to hear back from Chris about the numbers that we can support for activities. So at this point, that's on hold until we can look at those numbers. But I am pleased, like I said, to see so many opportunities during the school day for kids to socialize and work together.
And last but not least, Shaker Lane. So I would echo many of the sentiments that Principal Temple shared as far as classrooms. One of the nice things to bring back that she had mentioned was table time, students working together, kindergarten having choice time, working together, playing together, having those opportunities that some of these kids haven't had and may not have had since COVID started, when they were just little and not had the opportunity to be in any kind of educational institution or facility. So morning meetings. We also had quite a few events last year that happened virtually. We'll see. We have an upcoming PTA meeting in the next couple of weeks. We have our Winterfest where we get together after school. We also had a dance party, shaky story time where there was some conversation with the staff. We also have our book fair. We're hoping to have that outside this year. So that will be an event after school. During the year, we have Outdoor Classroom Day, which is also a wonderful opportunity for the kids to socialize, to be outside, to take their learning in a more natural environment, and Global Play Day. So we're hoping to bring those back this year as well. As far as clubs and activities, we're holding off on that with the 5, 6, and 7-year-olds.
Thank you all for those updates. Are there any questions from the school committee members before we go on to the next update?
I can't see anyone, so just jump in if I don't see any of the school committee members on my screen.
No, it's great to hear about so many activities and students' opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, it's very exciting to hear and see that, and the value and emphasis placed on that socialization is there and seen pre-K to 12. It's really nice to have that happening. So our next update is a reallocation of resources, and Ms. Lynn Snow is going to provide some information on that. Oh, you're muted, Lynn.
Just a quick update. Some of the things that we're doing in response to acknowledging the need, especially for social emotional supports and mental health, is We have 2 open psychologist positions right now, but for until those are filled, we are reorganizing how we are deploying our psychologists so that they can focus exclusively their time on direct student support and consultation to teachers. So we will be utilizing a service to contract out for our evaluations, which will allow our psychologists to focus exclusively on work with the students. And then we've also added an additional BCBA to support the district to help with students who are struggling with behavior. Some of our students have, not been in a traditional classroom setting or going through the routines or been in a full classroom. So we've provided that additional support as well. And then we will be allocating some of the resources to provide consultation to our special education reading programs to build the capacity of our language-based programs throughout the district as well.
Thanks, Lynn. I'll pause in case any school committee members have any questions about that.
I have one quick one. I'm sorry. Just to clarify, Lynn, so we have 2 open positions for school psychologists. We're actively searching for those and seeking to fill them. Is that correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
so I actually received a very lovely application today that I will be following up on tomorrow. So yeah, we've been actively looking and searching to fill those positions. One is an additional position that we added for this coming year. One is filling a vacancy.
Oh, great. So adding a position, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Student learning time regulation.
All right, so with regards, that's my update. So with regards to student learning time regulation, all the modifications and exceptions that were put into place last year are no longer applicable. They expired with the last day of last school year. And so the regulation states, and DESE has been pretty clear, that the students must attend school for 180 days and for a minimum of 900 in the elementary, 990 in secondary hours. And DESE has explicitly said, as we have heard just tonight a couple of times, that remote learning does not count towards the student learning time. So it does not count towards the 900 or the 990 hours. And so that played a factor into planning for this school year. So just want to make sure that these updates were provided for everyone, so we're all on the same page again with some of this information, and hopefully that helped clarify any questions that were asked during that 4th question during the survey. So that leads us to the next slide, which is the actual plan for the ESSER grant. So the total amount of funds that Littleton Public Schools is eligible to receive is that $357,219 amount that you see at the top of the screen there. We have planned it out into 7 buckets that are all listed here. And you can see the percentage of that total allotment for each of those bucket areas. And so you can see PPE supplies, we're planning on spending about 2.1% of that $357,000 total. 9.8% towards creating outdoor classroom / lunch space. So making sure that we have canopies available for teachers, staff, and students to use throughout the day. 5.6% for technology support. We're going one-to-one, and the pandemic pushed us to go one-to-one a little bit faster and at more grade levels. And so maintaining that technology support this upcoming school year. Also 5.5% for mental health supports, 42% to MTSS, 28% for reading and literacy intervention, and 7% for special education language-based programs. So Lynn did just mention those last 2 when she was speaking with regards to the reallocation. Some of those funds are being used out of the ESSER grant to what she spoke to. And then what I want to just dive into a little bit here is that number 5, the 42% of the MTSS support, because that is the what we're anticipating being the largest expenditure out of this grant. So again, more letters in education. What does MTSS mean? MTSS is a multi-tiered system of support. And it's really a framework or a system of supports that is designed to meet the needs of all learners by using data-driven decision-making, progress monitoring, evidence-based strategies and practices at a tiered intervention strategy in order to make sure that all of our students are supported academically, behaviorally, as well as social and emotionally. And so really MTSS is this framework that supports the whole child, which we feel to be really important, especially given the situation that we are in. So as I mentioned, this is the plan that we are planning on putting forth to the department as our grant submission. The grant is due October 4th, so we will be putting that in before that date. And so thanks for the time for allowing us to provide this update tonight. And thank you very much to all of those that spent time this summer responding to that survey. It was very helpful and beneficial for the creation of this plan.
Thanks, Beth and Liz. Looks like your plan closely mirrors what we saw in the surveys, what people want. So that's great. Does any of the school committee have questions regarding the plan?
Yeah, the one place where I saw a divergence from what people wanting, and maybe it's I just don't understand it, is that there seemed to be a real focus among the participant responses on mental health. I see 5.5% of these funds, if we get the grant, will go towards that. Is that because the MTSS has a large social emotional component to it as well? Or is it because that a lot of the mental health supports are growing, as Lynn suggested earlier, into just our regular budget and not kind of one-time spending?
So both, yes, some of that. And then also in addition to the ESSER grant, there are supplemental grants that are going to be provisioned for with regard to special education too.
Yeah, that was my second question, but thank you. Okay.
Yeah, and following up on that, I don't know that we want to take that much time tonight. Maybe the MTSS, thank you for clarifying the acronym, but I still don't really understand what it comprises and where that huge chunk of the money goes. So maybe we could table that and put that on the agenda for a future session, but I'd love to dig into that a little bit more and understand it better, because it's clearly like the cornerstone of that budget. So that'd be great to learn more. Sure. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. I did want to bring up one thing before we move on to the school handbook language for masking requirements. If you recall, at our last meeting, we rescinded all of our orders regarding our own mask mandates, given the mandates put forward by the Commissioner Riley at DESE. And then we had the Board of Health put in their town-wide mask mandate. Apparently there is some ambiguity in there regarding the pre-K students, whereas DESE mandated it for 5 and over and highly recommended it for students under 5. Therefore, I just wanted to see if we had to revisit that. Dr. Clenchey, do you have any thoughts on that, or whether we need to take a vote to put that back in place now that our old mandates are rescinded?
Thank you, Matt. I mean, our past practice has been inclusive of all children in our schools, but because DESE kept the 5 years of age, they had that last year as well, and we went below that. The Board of Health has 2 years old and up. So I think it would be in our best interest to have a motion this evening supporting all students in Littleton Public Schools be masked, following the guidelines that DESE has put out in terms of duration, etc.
Okay. Any thoughts from the school committee before we?
Matt, sorry, one more thing I'd like to add. We've, as I said, this has been past practice. We've worked with our preschool families and students last year. This year we're off to a real good start as well. We're cognizant that they're at a younger age, and we do everything we can to make sure that our students are well supported with mask breaks, etc. Anything they need to make sure that they have a good experience during the school day. And maybe Michelle, would you like to add to that before we open it up for discussion?
Sure. So last year, as Dr. Clenchey shared, we did have our students wear masks that were present at Shaker Lane. They did well with it. When they need mask breaks, they take them. You know, if there is a child that has a medical condition or a reason that warrants them not to wear a mask, we talk with the families and see if they want us to try and work on mask tolerance. And we do that if that's appropriate for that child. But the students are doing great, and yeah, they're handling it well, as they did last year.
Right. I feel like we kind of discussed this a lot in the summer leading up to our initial mask votes. We had some very passionate teachers come on talking about their comfortability, or comfort level working with students unmasked, what that would look like for the classroom. And we voted unanimously at that time for all Shaker Lane students to wear masks. So just keeping that in mind, I'll open it up to any school committee members who want to have a question. Timlin?
Yeah, I just have I need some clarification. I've heard from people, is our Board of Health superseding DESE, or does DESE supersede our Board of Health? I'm just.
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the way it was set up, is that the Board of Health should, whereas it's a town-wide mandate, should be superseding us. They cannot directly target just the schools and say the schools have to be that. That falls under our purview, but a total town mandate should include the schools.
Right, that's how I saw it.
The problem is they do have one stipulation there saying that they will not, these will not affect the rules put in place by the commissioner at DESE. My understanding when I read that is that meaning if this order is rescinded by the commissioner or by the Board of Health, and the commissioner still stands in place for the schools. Now,
but what if we reach that 80% and the commissioner says you don't have to wear a mask?
Well, that's
then we have the Board of Health. It's just confusing.
Exactly. So that's my other point. So the Board of Health, if we went and did that, I think we get a lot of pushback from the Board of Health and saying, oh, well, the commissioner says we don't have to wear masks anymore. So that's why I interpreted it one way. But people, what I said, it's a little bit ambiguous and people can interpret it either way. So I think that's why we need to have the motion to clarify it, just so there's no question there.
Okay.
I can jump in. So I think this question was specifically asked last night at the Board of Health meeting. And the Board of Health essentially said that their mandate does not supersede DESE and does not apply specifically to the school system. So this question of, are we going to try to mask? Are we going to mandate a mask for pre-K? I believe falls on our shoulders and not the Board of Health. It has nothing to do with their mandate. They punted to us tonight. And where I stand on this is, I don't know why we would, let's think about who these kids are. They're under 5. It's an early intervention preschool program. Oh, it's not a at-large population. We have community peers, but a lot of these kids that are attending this are attending it for services, and they're probably best suited making their own decision. If you're there for speech services, if you're there for other needs, a mask is going to be a hindrance. The recommendation or my thought process is we would continue to follow DESE's recommendation, which is to recommend that those folks wear a mask, but not required. I don't know why we would do more than what DESE is recommending. They're the experts. They're the ones that have the local knowledge. They've got these wonderful test and stay programs in place for us. That's where I'm at. I mean, I think it's our decision. And we had said, we had voted previously to mirror what DESE is suggesting and to and that's where I'm at. I would suggest that we continue to follow the DESI guidelines. Otherwise, I think when it is back on our shoulders, we're looking at 7-hour meetings again, if we want to do something other than what DESI's recommending. So I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks.
Anybody else want to jump in on this?
That's a compelling argument, right? There's no doubt about that. I also think it's a compelling argument to be made that we need consistency, and that we all voted to mask these students a month ago, before we had the DESI guidelines, because we listened to the teachers and we're looking at the metrics the best way that we could interpret them. It's what we did last year. We've heard from the principal that it doesn't interfere extraordinarily with education. We understand that they can, and again, I'm someone who's spent a lot of time in speech therapy with my kids, that there can be exceptions and waivers and clear mask. I differ from Justin on this one, and I think we should have Shaker Lane apply the policies across all grade levels at Shaker Lane, including preschool.
Anyone else before?
Brad, that's a good point. I mean, I hear you. The one counter argument to that is that you are going to have a certain set of population within that program that's going to be exempt from masking. And then you only have a certain percentage that's community peers. So now all of a sudden we're allowing some kids to not wear masks. Other kids have to.
Yeah, listen, Justin, I get it. And
it gets messy.
And, and when I'm not on these meetings, I'm on meetings often advocating for deaf and hard of hearing children, where masking presents often very difficult challenges. However, to use your kind of line of thought, if we adopt this approach, then we're going to have some kids walking around the building without masks, and most of the kids walking around with masks. And so there's going to be a discrepancy, or either way. I'm in favor of the uniformity. I'm well aware I'll probably lose, but that's fine. But I think that I was comfortable with our vote before. I would still be comfortable having those restrictions in place.
Just a point of clarification, mask exemptions apply to all of our students. And if Lynn, correct me if I've forgotten a bit of the data, they were pretty well non-existent last year. Is that a correct assumption?
We did have a few students that needed to build their tolerance to wear a mask. We were able to give extended, extra mask breaks for them to be comfortable with wearing masks. We were able to accommodate those needs. All of our students were masked. I think one other point to consider too is that we do have 5-year-old preschoolers. And so that is also a factor to consider. We have students with disabilities in preschool that are 5 and sometimes 6 years old. And so we have to consider consistency.
All right. I'm personally with Brad here. I think it's going to create bigger issues to having a child. We have 5-year-old pre-K students. We have students in pre-K who will turn 5. So all of a sudden we're telling them wear a mask. I think the easier thing is to stay uniform. There are exemptions. I work in a special ed school during the summer where kids had mask exemptions if they needed it. So, I think that it's not a lot to ask for students and build, I think the teachers are working, administrators, to build up mask tolerance. So personally, I think we've already voted this. We've already heard the teachers' feelings on it. My feeling is we should just keep it universal masking for the entire district at this time.
That said, when we had that vote, we didn't have the DESI guidance that Justin's citing. And if part of our justification for our actions is we're deferring to the experts, as Kelly said earlier, I'm arguing against my own position, but that's a compelling argument. I understand why we disagree.
Brad, yeah, that's a good point you bring up. I mean, they are both compelling arguments. I'm gonna put one more point out there. Last year, we went through various phases of learning modes when we were pivoting during the pandemic. During the entire year, our mitigation factors worked in the sense that we did not have any in-school spread. And I think I can't provide sufficient evidence. There is some evidence. Some would say that's sufficient, some wouldn't, but masking was a key component to keeping our kids safe last year. And at this point in time, until we get better control of this virus, I would ask that you all consider that we do whatever we can to keep our students and staff safe until we get a better control on the spread of COVID-19 in our community and in our surrounding area.
Okay, Dorothy, it does look like we do have a couple questions from the community. Again, I'm sticking with the one-time caller kind of thing, so we can take Sebastian.
Okay.
Not any other first-time callers, but
Sebastian Klein, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Yes, hi, Sebastian Klein, 2 Dogwood Road. I understand the measures that were put in place last year. I value the success that we've seen. I understand it was a difficult vote. However, what I'm hearing are a lot of logistical considerations here. And as of August 25th, when DESE issued their guidelines, those experts were not comfortable issuing a mandate that would reach further down than age 5. So I guess that's what I would question. I understand all of what happened in the past, but putting our kids' best interest to the forefront, what is the rationale or the data point that we're going to leverage to justify just keeping with a vote that happened before those guidelines were issued?
anyone want to jump on that?
I don't know if this adds more relevancy to helping in this area, but last year we had or DESE had the same statement in their protocols for masking. It was age 5 and up. And we felt very strongly at that point in time, it also was negotiated with our union, our teachers union, that all students in our school be masked. So I just wanted to bring that up. It certainly, I know this is a new year, but I also realize that we're dealing with a virus that is much more virulent than the one we were dealing with last year as well.
Yeah, and Sebastian, that's maybe my answer is not sufficient. I do know, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I think if I saw the numbers correctly, there have been dozens and dozens of childcare clusters that have emerged since the DESE guidance, which indicates to me that it's possible that you can have spread at kids under the age of 5. And also to Kelly's point last year is that relative to last year is that last year we had a lot of additional mitigation factors in place. We were trying for most of the year in cohorts. We were trying most of the year in 6 feet distance. We've eliminated a lot of those mitigation factors that helped keep the school safe. We've heard from the teachers. I trust their expertise as well. It's a judgment call, and reasonable people will disagree on this. I'm going to err on the side of safety, but recognizing that other people see the issue differently and are not looking for unsafe. I'm not trying to suggest that. These are good questions.
I think it is a valid question that we need to consider, but I do also, like I said, I feel like we've covered this a lot over the summer, and we had a bigger audiences than we have tonight, and we had a lot of input on this. the same question. And people felt very strongly, the teachers included calling and saying that, they would teach differently if students, unvaccinated students were unmasked at the elementary level, pre-K level. But again, that's my position.
But again, to argue against interest here is not interest against the position I'm taking is that we have said as a committee, we will consider new evidence as it appears. And part of the new evidence is the DESE guidance that Sebastian and Justin are pointing out. And it's, I'm not voting this way or proposing to vote this way because, hey, that's what we did last time. It's still my considered opinion in spite of these new data points. It's not just reflexive.
And Dorothy, looks like we have Kelly Hart. She hasn't spoken tonight. If you want to put her in, I know she is a teacher at Shaker Lane.
Kelly Hart, please state your name, your question, and your street, please. My apologies.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kelly Hart. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Shaker Lane, and I live at 18 Hibiscus Lane in Air. I just wanted to say that children do really well in masks. Really young children do really well in masks. I just started my new kindergarten year, and I have some kids who just turned 5 in August, and they're wearing their masks very well. If we start our very young children wearing masks, they have an opportunity to build up their tolerance. And unfortunately, there's no sign that this virus isn't going to be around next year too. I mean, I'm on year 3 now of COVID and of COVID teaching. And when children have an opportunity to practice wearing masks, getting those gentle reminders if they need to put them up over their nose, or finding out if kids really can't tolerate it and working through other avenues, to have a whole building that's all masked, I think it keeps us all safe, especially with all of these children that are unvaccinated.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Can I just the idea here is to eventually get out of masks, right? I mean, we want to return to normal life with coronavirus, with COVID-19 probably being here forever. So the fact that we're like training kids to wear masks, I mean, I know that's not what you mean. It sounds depressing. We have to, you have to take, like, as a vaccinated adult, I go about my life normally at this point in time because I've accepted the risk of COVID-19 and I know what the risk is. And, the risk is a breakthrough case and all that good stuff. And it's extremely, extremely, extremely low. Like, there's a great chance I'm going to be okay. And the same is true for these kids that are under 12. So to be training kids to wear masks, we got to get out of masks at some point in time. Maybe we're not going to get out of them this year, but I mean, if DESE and it's also the World Health Organization, they say you shouldn't put kids in masks under 5. They're learning every day. Their brain is processing new information at such rapid rates that a mask is a hindrance. And I get that when you take the mask off, there's that additional risk, but I'm here to say that the risk is not that great. And the pros of having a mask off for these kids is more important than them wearing a mask. Now, granted, if you want to wear a mask, you can, but I'm just not comfortable requiring masks on kids 2 to 5. I'm just not there. And I had to say that coming off of that last call, and I appreciate that. She's a teacher and all that good stuff, but it's just the conversation starts to go sideways pretty quick.
Thanks, Justin. I think the one thing you're saying is you and I being vaccinated, but like you said, children under 12 at this point don't have that option of being vaccinated. We do have immunocompromised students in the school at that age. I think we want to do, in my personal opinion, is to do as much as we can to protect them. I was really hoping that vaccinated students would not have to be wearing masks. So I think that many of us are looking to get out of masks. And I think the way that we see the route to do that is through the vaccinations. And as vaccinations become available to more the younger students, hopefully by the first of the year, for 5 to 11-year-olds, we may see things changing. But I don't think any of us are wanting to train kids to stay in masks permanently. And believe me, I do the same thing. I take that mask off as soon as I can, and I'm in a school. As soon as I'm out the door, that mask comes off. It's not something that I love doing, but I look forward to the day when we can be without masks, but I'm not so sure it's today.
I'll add on that. So if you look at the data, what the vaccine essentially does is it basically makes you 30 years younger. So if you look at the hospitalization rates for the 80-year-olds that are then vaccinated, they've got the same hospitalization rates as the 50-year-olds and so on. So when you're underage, when you're 4 and you become 30 years younger, you're already safe for the most part. The odds are very, very low, very, very low.
They're low, but I think you're seeing children going into the school with the Delta variant. I'm sorry, going into the hospitals with the Delta variant. This isn't something we saw with the earlier variants.
It's one, in Massachusetts, it's 1 out of 200,000 kids are in the hospital ages 0 to 11. It's virtually nobody. I'm just giving you the data. And then I guess I'm giving you an opinion that it's virtually nobody, but that's fine. We can hear from Jen or Timolin and we can move to a vote. Obviously we could talk about this all night long and pretty passionate about it, but I don't want you to keep stealing the floor.
Okay. So with that, I would accept a motion on this.
You or me, Justin?
My motion is going to be that we continue to follow DESI guidance. So if I could make that motion, or you could make them, you could make the motion. Doesn't matter, Brad.
We're going to split vote. Let's I move that we have the preschool follow the mask guidance that's in place for the rest of Shaker Lane School.
I will second that vote.
Motion made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Start with Timolin.
Timolin Rossius, yes.
Jen.
Jen Gold, no.
Brad.
Brad Austin, yes.
Justin.
Justin McCarthy, no.
Matt Hunt votes yes. The yeses have it. Okay. Next order of business is the school handbook language for masking requirements.
Thanks, Matt. With the introduction of the mask mandate by the state, DESI recommended that we revisit our handbooks and insert language in our handbooks that specifically address masking. And the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Lawyers provided us with a brief on that as well, came to the same conclusion that they recommend that we have something in our handbook specific to masking. Our lawyers drafted this up for us, the language that you have before you this evening. Any language, actually, the law states just the high school, but for years in our district, we've voted to accept changes in all handbooks, and I think we should continue to do that because this would be inserted in all handbooks. Language does promote the least amount of conflict, to work with families and students that may have trouble adjusting to masks. Certainly doesn't deviate from what we've been doing for the past 2 years, entering our third, so to speak. So this has been vetted again by our leadership team as well. We're happy with the language. We understand that it falls under something called 37H 3/4, and we agree with the legal advice that we've been given by DESI, MASS, and our own lawyers. So I would propose that you entertain a motion to accept this language so that it can be placed into our school handbooks.
Does anyone have any questions on?
I have a question. So what's the protocol for when this changes later this year, when things are looking good, Delta's behind us, and we loosen mask regulations? What's the protocol for changing this kind of language?
Well, it should fall into the first sentence in the last paragraph. Adhere to all mandates related to face coverings issued by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So if those things are relaxed, then this policy would become null and void at that time, if there were no mask requirements.
So this is basically just saying, if there's a mandate in place, you have to follow it.
That's correct.
I may have missed this. Were we advised to put this into the handbook via council?
Yes, by DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Mass Association of School Superintendents Lawyers, our lawyers. So 3 different entities. It does fall under section 37H and 3/4 of the statutes pertinent to discipline codes.
Okay, so this is kind of like the meat behind the mandate, where this is the enforceability aspect of it.
Correct.
Okay.
So another question, when they're eating, if in between bites and sips, they have to put the mask up. Is that true?
We would not deviate from our current practice at all. So
Is that the current practice?
when you're eating, you're unmasked. That's our current practice, yeah. And when
But
you're
it's not bite to bite. I think it's Jen's question. It's
Yeah.
it's not. No.
Okay.
It's not.
If I recall correctly, I think that's what the principals were talking about is, we make sure they usually get their mask back up after 12 minutes or something. So they don't cross that 15-minute barrier that does.
When they're finished eating.
I'm just reading it really carefully because it's important to be specific, I think, but okay.
No one has any more questions. I'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to add the proposed language to the student handbook.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Timlin,
Timlin Rossi is yes.
Jen,
Gold, yes.
Brad,
Austin, yes.
Justin
McCarthy, yes.
Matt Hunt votes yes as well. Next up is PPE. Steve Mark's going to give us a quick presentation on any updates on PPE.
Yeah, good evening again. In regards to PPE that's available, I don't have slides, so I'll just walk through this. We do have PPE available for all staff, all students as needed. We have a number of, we have adult masks and student masks available. Student masks available are student size, they're kid size masks if needed. And in regards to a comment both Lynn and Brad made in regards to speech services, we do make clear masks available both to students and staff as needed and as requested. As far as PPE masks, we have a variety of masks. We have a large supply of the 3-ply surgical masks that are available. We also have some KN95 masks that are available, and we have some N95 masks that are available. Now, the N95 masks are usually reserved for medical staff, but we do make those available. Just as a reminder, and this was also in the language that was just adopted, just a reminder to everybody that all students must wear a mask on the bus. We do make masks available on the buses. If a student shows up to the bus without a mask, the drivers do have a supply of masks available to hand out to all students as needed. We also have face shields available if student or staff wants to supplement the mask with a face shield. Again, these are clear face shields. We have adult sizes and student sizes as well. We've also provided, as requested, desktop barriers and clear petitions to any teacher who has requested those for their desktop. We also have provided desktop petitions for student desktops at the schools that they were requested. We also have hand sanitizer in all of the classrooms and throughout the school. The hand sanitizer stations are available when students board and exit the bus and come into the school. They're located at all of the entrances and exits to the school. There's plenty of hand sanitizer available in the hallways, in the classrooms, in the lunchrooms. That's always available. There are gloves available for staff if needed as well. Again, we provide gowns for medical staff as they need those as well. All of the classrooms also, as we did last year, we continue to provide disinfectant wipes in the cafeterias and the libraries and the classrooms. So any staff or student who wishes to grab some wipes and disinfect any surfaces that they're using, or that's available for them as well. We're also, again, that's what we have for PPE, but I'd also like to just highlight the cleaning protocols that we do as well. We do continue to disinfect the building using our electrostatic misting machines. We do that at a minimum of 2 times a week. That's usually Wednesday night and Friday night, sometimes Saturday morning if we can't get to a Friday night for some reason. But that will continue to happen throughout the year, regardless of what happens with mask mandates and infection rates. We will continue that all year this year. Not only does it help with COVID transmission, but in our opinion, just an opinion, it also helps with other flu transmission as well. So we will continue to that throughout the year. So PPE is available. It has been distributed to the schools. We have more available if needed. And as you saw in the ESSER slide, we have set aside some funds to replace those as we deplete those stocks. So I'd be more than glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Steve? Everything sounds great, Steve. Okay. This brings us to our last section, interested citizens.
Matt, before you go on to that, do you want to have a conversation about school committee meetings tonight, or did you want to wait till our next meeting in terms of, are we going to have them alternate? Or I did have an opportunity to talk with LCTV today. We are down one venue for meetings, so there is a bit of a strain in booking meetings. So there's a sense of urgency if we want to have an in-person meeting to book it, so we have a space for it. When the police station is renovated, apparently they're still waiting for windows. That will be another venue that comes up to speed. And then my understanding is the library will be fully equipped as well as a fourth venue when they're fully operational. And I guess one of the most important points is they feel pretty comfortable with their technology with the hybrid model. Remember the last meeting we had in hybrid, we did have some glitches, and they feel that they've been able to take care of those glitches.
Yeah, I know I'm in favor of meeting in person as much as possible. I think the big question we had prior to tonight's meeting was it feasible? And if it was feasible, was it desirable as far as would we go through the glitches again? So if LCTV is telling us that they can do it and they can do it well, I think that it would be in our interest to try and do some in-person hybrid meetings. One thing that's different about us than some of the other boards is we usually have a very big panel, so which can limit our space. But if they're able to, video feed in some of the principals and some of the other people we typically have, that could work. Any other thoughts on it?
And we would have to ask.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add. I think some of the other boards in town have maybe agreed that they would return to in-person meetings once the mask mandate was lifted. I'm okay meeting in person. I'm okay meeting in person masked. I think from a communication standpoint, it might be a little more difficult to meet in person masked in a panel setting. So I would prefer to stick with Zoom while the mask mandate is in place for the town of Littleton. And then once we're able to meet in person unmasked, I would be all for getting back to meeting in person. Just my 2 cents.
I would agree. I feel like in person is best, but for this type of communication, I think in person masked is maybe doesn't outweigh the benefits of remaining remote. So I agree. I think as is until that's changed.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Until we can meet unmasked, I think we should stay with Zoom.
Brad?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I do think we should be in person as soon as we can, and I'm aware that we're asking our teachers to teach and communicate with large groups while wearing masks, and we might want to step up and try it. I do it all day in the classroom. I'm fine with that. For me, the priority is making sure that we are able to keep hearing from citizens who don't have to drive and sit in the parking lot at the police station for 2 hours before they talk to us. But I'll show up wherever you tell me. I'm good either way.
Sounds like we have a consensus there, Kelly, that we'd like to remain on the Zoom until the mask mandate is lifted.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Looks like we have a few hands, Dorothy, if we want to go to interested citizens.
Okay. John K., please state your name, your street, and your address, please. Your question, please.
Hey, it's John Kurzwick, 171 Hartwell Ave. Hey, on the wording for the mask in the student handbook, I did notice. I tried to get my hand up to make a comment on that. Wording seems to contradict the vote that just was taken. The wording, as I read it, said that the students must follow, or the staff must follow state or federal guidance, which specifically called out DESE. And I think DESE's recommendation is for kids 5 and over to wear masks, not 5 and under. So I'm not a lawyer, but you might want to take a look at that wording there. So that was the comment that I wanted to make on the wording.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for making that comment.
So John, there we go. Jennifer Klein, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jen Klein. I live at 2 Dogwood Road. I heard it said before and tonight that the teachers are considering treating children differently based on wearing masks, being unvaccinated, anything related to COVID protocols by individuals. And I'm very concerned about the ethical position in doing that, just like we wouldn't discriminate against children for their religion or their skin color or, whatever reason. No one should be treating children differently for any reason at all.
Yeah, I think that.
I think what we were talking about in that regards was teachers with the entire class. If there was not just one particular student that they're not going to, but they would teach their entire class differently if some students had masks and some did not, being comfortable getting within a certain place, getting it in someone's face, whereas you need to be closer to someone. Kelly, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. There's certainly that children would be treated differently, whether they were vaccinated, unvaccinated, masked, or unmasked. The comment was really within a context that in order for our teachers to do the best job they can in the classroom, they need to feel as comfortable as they can working with all children. If they're a little reticent because of concerns about COVID being spread, they're not going to take as many risks with all students in the classroom in terms of the strategies that they use. They'll maintain most likely a little more distancing, for example. So it certainly was in reference to being comfortable with all students, certainly not singling out any students.
Yeah, Jen, that's a good point. If I mischaracterized our conversation earlier, I apologize. I think what we were talking about last time we had this conversation, we heard from Littleton teachers, but also I was talking about my experience, just making different pedagogical decisions in terms of grouping, in terms of small group work, compare and share, things like that. I'll tell you, I spent 2 hours a day teaching at Salem High School. I teach a college class there, and we've got 22 students in a room with no windows. And I had a conversation with my co-teacher about how we're going to do grouping. They're masked, but the there are decisions we're making about what we can do as teachers and having the students work with each other. And we're factoring in the mitigation strategies that are in place. That's what I think, the tenor of the conversation earlier, and I'm sorry if we mischaracterized it.
You know, Dorothy, Matthew Ridge has been waiting so patiently. I typically don't do twice in one night, but why don't we hear what Matthew has to say before we sign off?
Matthew, state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Matthew Ridge, 325 Great Road. Just one real big thing and just one small thing. One, I keep on hearing that we're not the experts. You know, if you're making these decisions, you need to be knowledgeable. You just can't go by what the experts, quote unquote, say. This is no longer about, because the CDC does not clarify numbers accurately. The state doesn't clarify numbers accurately. Because if they did, we would not be in this situation. The state of Massachusetts itself has hundreds of cases, but they don't say if they don't say what age groups, what anything else. So right now we're looking at putting our children into masks and things of the sort when the median overall age of people who are being infected are over 30 or 35 age. The median death rate is 74. Now, that is well beyond student range. That is more towards teacher range. The fear is on the teacher side, not the student side. If the teachers are afraid, we need to have these teachers understand that they are here to teach the students. Now, I understand that there is some hesitancy on, as I've heard in the past, that they are more hesitant about being around children who have COVID. You know what? If I was afraid of every single child that I had to teach at one point in time in my life, because I used to teach as well. If I had to worry about them having the flu, the common cold, whatever, and trust me, those are more infectious in some cases than COVID. The common cold is terrible all a kid has to do is just touch you and you can get it. The COVID is just as bad. So I don't see why we are treating COVID any worse than the common cold when it comes to people who are older. That being said, we need to get people on this board or have these people on as speakers who are knowledgeable, not just one, not just two, but we need them for both sides. We just don't have pro, we don't just have con. We need to have the full story. And right now, I'm afraid we are not having that. That is not a justification. That is not justifying anything. It's fact. We don't have, all we have is people catering towards one message, which is you must mask because the teachers are afraid. I understand the teachers are afraid, but if the teachers are that afraid, maybe they should go back to remote, because there's no reason why our students and our children should be held captive because a handful of teachers are afraid of getting COVID, because that's exactly what it's come down to. It is basically, we are being held hostage by the teachers union and everybody else because the students might have COVID. You can't live in fear, and I'm sorry, you can't. It's a risk. You walk out of the house, it's a risk. You go to the movie theaters, it's a risk. You go to the food store, it's a risk. You go to the mall, it's a risk. You have a better chance of getting any of those. You have a better chance of getting COVID in any of those situations than you would inside a school system. You have even a greater chance of getting it when you're at home. So I really don't understand why we are so hell-bent on getting this fear factor here right now, because honestly, if we go by CDC ruling now, it has to be 95%, not 80%, because of the new Delta variant. And that just came down within the last few weeks. So, I mean, they're going to keep on increasing the number until it's at 100%, and that's never going to happen. The other thing is that my son will wear a mask. I will have no issue with him doing that, but he will not be wearing it for the rest of the school year, even if he's vaccinated or unvaccinated. The thing is that this is not a permanent fix. My child cannot wear a mask for the rest of the school year. He is emotionally, he has emotionally reverted back a year at least. He is going through transition because of this, because of the fear. We need to stop this. And that's all I'm going to say. I mean, I know people are arguing back and forth about it, but the choices have already been made. But coming soon, we need to put our foot down. We need to stop living by fear, because if we keep living by fear, we are never going to have the freedom to actually do what we need to, which is teach our children the right way. Having our children and teachers wear a mask, there's a lot that's happening and that you do not see that is detrimentally hurting our children. And we will see it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And we will all be paying for it because of this. I'm not going to have our children do that. Their education is more important than anything in the world to me. And right now, if somebody's afraid, get somebody in there who's not. I'm sorry if I have to be that cold and callous, but that's basically what my belief is. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other parents are saying that now. They're just not speaking up because they know it's not going to do any good. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Matt. All right. And again, we do appreciate everyone's situation is different out there, and you know, we do take that into consideration. I don't think it's not falling on deaf ears. We want to get out of this as soon as possible. We just want to do it the right way and safely. And people have different opinions on how to do that. So and that's where we're coming across. We're all trying to do our best job here and do what we think is right for the community. That being said, I think that the only other thing we have is subcommittee reports. Anything to report for PMBC?
We had a meeting last night and Steve Mark was there. We have now started to put the process in place to start the high school roof over the administration offices. So hopefully that ball has started rolling and that will be in place by next spring so that we can fix the roof.
Awesome. And budget subcommittee.
I'd like to report that our first meeting for the current year will take place next Wednesday. So after we have our first meeting, we'll likely have something to report back. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin. Anything from policy subcommittee? Nothing. CPAC?
Yes. There are four workshops planned between now and Thanksgiving. We've got 2 on dyslexia and literacy coming up, 1 on executive function strategies, and 1 on the basic rights and the IEP process for those who are new to this process or want to explore it. You can get the details on that on the Facebook page and also on the website, which is littletonmacpac.org. And there's also a business meeting for those who are interested in that on September 28th. CPAC continues to be active.
Great. And Dr. Clenchey, there's no executive session tonight. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so at this point, I'll entertain a motion to end.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, thank you. I'm really tired.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Brad?
Brad Austin votes yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Timlin?
Timlin Rossi is yes.
Jen?
Jen Gold, yes.
Matt Hunt votes yes as well. We'll see you guys on September 30th for our next school committee meeting.